All right, shalom, shalom, family. Shalom, shalom. Welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to the channel. As you all
Shalom,
can tell
family.
by the day, yes. As you all can tell by the day, we're going to get into some Semitic DNA. And of course, I have with me today the brother Lion Farm. I know you all enjoyed the last video we did, the last build we did. So indeed, I had to bring the brother back. So go ahead and do your thing, brother.
Shalom, shalom, family. I just wanted to say shalom. How you doing? I just wanted to say shalom. So I'm gonna follow after Will. I'm just gonna give some highlights to some, as always, we're always building, and sometimes when you're building in the truth, it multiplies because you're not just building in lies. So the liars, they got to complex stuff and try to twist and hide stuff, but we actually have to just take the truth and bring it forth. That's all we have to do. Find the truth, bring forth the truth, and let it do its thing. So
Exactly, like the brother saying, we know according to all of our peoples or traditions, they claim descent from the Middle East. They claim they migrated from the Middle East. So what we're going to try to do today is basically confirm that by way of their haplogroup, their DNA. And we're going to do what 2 Corinthians 13 chapter 1 says, right? We're going to, in the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses shall every word be established. So we're going to establish this with multiple witnesses, all right? And before we get started, is there anything you want to explain about haplogroups or anything before we get into it, brother?
I guess just so that we start, so that all the brothers, because we also have brothers that may not be too familiar with haplogroups. So if we could, I want to bring out a real quick understanding on the charts and when we talk about these letters and stuff, right? If someone's not too familiar with it, just to get a refresher on the letters of those things. Because what I have with me, I have a few professional charts that pretty much show there's different ways to present a chart. And what I have is those types of styles that they have, but there's one type of one that you really want, which is called an unrooted chart. And that's going to really give you an in-depth look on the lines of Ham, Shem, and Japheth. So once you establish that, and then you can just dive in and see who is who and where they're found in ancient genetics. So I just wanted to show. I'm gonna see if that. Let me see. Show the screen. There we go. All right. So you gotta show that screen on the bottom if you could. All right. So I want to show you something now because this is actually fairly important. First, let me show you something real fast. So when a geneticist works with genetics, there's 3 ways of presenting genetics as a group. There's a circular mode, there's your normal mode, which these modes just make it complex to look at, but they can be understood. But the easier one is this one right here. I'm sorry that it's so bright if it looks bright, but this is called your unrooted mode. The reason why you want to look at unrooted mode, because there is a genetic quote by a geneticist that word for word says, let me just show you this quote that he actually says here, right here. This is evidence of the Bible. He says right here, he says, it's true that the 3 major haplogroups have long been recognized by mainstream science. Now, what he's talking about here is that there's a clear split And I'm going to show you that split and what geneticists actually see on our unrooted chart. I'm going to show you that split, and it'll show you who's the lines of Ham, Shem, and Japheth. Those are 3 lineages that we're going to look at. So here's a copy. You can actually see the split in the female's line. You'll note them as L, M, and N. So keep a note of L. L is actually the line that you see in Israel a lot. So L is going to be one lineage, and then you're going to have M and N. That's what they call it, L, M, and N. Now, there's also another split that's usually not talked about by geneticists. The reason why is because, one, it makes a very clear distinction of what's written in the Bible. So let me just tell you what it basically is. And they know this is true. There's a split here right at the center. And what you actually see is a lineage of A's and B's, which are actually going to be, long story short, your Hamitic or Hamite lineages. And then you have your pretty much your E's and D's. Sometimes they say C is also with E. Sometimes they say C is on this side. So for the sake of understanding, let's just make it and say the C is on this side, just for the sake of understanding. Because C is one of those things that even the geneticists know it has like this middle ground. The reason why, let me explain why. Because C and F, CF makes the Japhetic lines. And there's a split directly from C, T, that splits and makes D lineages and your F lineages. So understand this, the C lineages are more closer related. I don't know how so, but they're more closer related to the lines of the, basically Shem is more closer to Hem than a lot of people know. That Shem is very close to Hem, but Shem on the branch, because remember looking at genetics, Shem on the branch, when we look at CT, the split from CT, it goes to DE, where you see DE right here, and it goes to CF or F right here, bringing these all right here, as you can see here. You can also see that if we was to open up one on family tree and everything, but I just want to show you just a clean cut before we dive in on these things. Just know this. This is going to be your Shemitic lines. This is going to be your Hamitic lines. And this is going to be your Japhetic lines right here. So anything you see underneath these labels right here, it's going to be Japhetic. And that's also proven because we can also, I was just talking about how we know our lineage 100%, without a doubt. We know 100% that this is going to be your Scythians, which Flavius Josephus names word for word that they are the line of Japheth. Also, we also can confirm I is going to be Japhetic because it's undeniable. Cheddar man, they say, is European. Cheddar man is going to be of the line of Japheth. That's not a doubt. And you can see that's also connected with J. So this is actually going to be your Japhetic lines right here. And then it's going to be your Shemitic lines. It's going to be your Hamitic lines. And that's also proven in genetics. So that's actually what we'll talk about today on some things. So just to get the clear understanding, your E lineage, there's going to be 2 different lines of E. You're going to have E1B1B and E1B1A. So E1B1A is actually going to be the lineage that brings forth Israel, pretty much. That's going to be the lineage that actually Israel comes from on the E lineage. Now, just to get another clear look, remember how I told you, sorry if to use so much time just explaining this part first, but I want to make sure everyone understands this at least. If you see any type of designs like this, know what you're looking at, right? If you see one that's unrooted, know what you're looking at. If you see one that's normal, I'm going to show you how to understand that one too in circular mode if you ever get to those things. I already did a live on these things because they try to make it complex, but it's not complex. They know the real design is the unrooted design. And the circular designs, those are just to try to make, a lot of these are for out of Africa designs. That's what that's what I was talking about too, that a lot of out of Africa designs is not true. That's important to know that a lot of out of Africa designs aren't true. And that's what's also going to be talked about today with the E lineage, that there's a lot of evidence of it not actually being in Africa, even looking at ancient fossils and stuff like that. So very interesting to see. So the things that the brother's going to talk about today, know that it even came to the sense of understanding of multiple fulfillment. So it's going to be a very interesting study, I think. I think it's going to be a very interesting study. So let me just show you one more thing before I proceed. Now, remember what I was saying before I proceed? This may look complex, but you've probably seen this. If you look on your classic, you can type it down. If you never looked into genetics, if you want to get into genetics, it's easy, super easy. All you have to do is know the letters. And I'm gonna show you something real fast. Let's say you wanted to find, E1, B1A. Let's just say you wanted to just find E1, B1A. They call it a haplogroup, which basically means a simple group. Haplo, and group. just being simple group. Let me go to one. If you go to Wikipedia, Wikipedia actually uses medical information. So in this sense, you can use Wikipedia a lot. You want to use Wikipedia a lot because it does have sources connected to it, which gets you deeper into those things. But if you notice, usually they'll have something like this. You always want to see this, the tree. You want to learn this tree. And once you learn the tree, you can get a little more detailed on these things. So you see this right here. I'm just going to give you the answer on what you're seeing here, because at first, looking at it, it may not make sense, but I'm going to show you what actually is there. Because remember how I showed you unrooted mode and actually how they all split into 3 branches, and even the geneticists admit that there's 3 branches. It actually splits from right here, CT. Now, if you ever go to family tree DNA, go to where it says CT, and you'll see that you'll go down a list and you'll see CT. And from CT, it will bring you D, E, and CF. From CF brings all your Japhetic lineages. Remember, I was showing you that on our unrooted. It brings you all your Japhetic lineages right here, all the way to R down here. You can see R down here, Q, and stuff like that. Those are going to be, this is pretty much just what you're going to see here. This is going to be your upper Europe. This is going to be your China right here. This is going to be more of your Americas in a sense, or in some of the Indian areas, more in the area where you see Australia, the islands of Australia, maybe the islands like you're probably familiar with what they say, the little Atlantic around that area, but not called Atlantic, Pacific, pretty much Pacific. And then you have your R, which is your famous one in, Europe. This is your R lineage, which is mostly in Europe. You also have your I's and J's. Remember, those are going to be where they said that these were your Ashkenazi lineages that they chose, but a geneticist completely showed with that I, he showed that without a doubt that I, with the connection with J, that's going to be of a European stock. And we also can find that in ancient genetics. When I say ancient genetics, the reason why I'm also here is because that's what I master at. I'm more mastering at studying ancient genetics and looking at ancient peoples and where their genetics are from, because I think it's fairly interesting. And what you notice here, what's interesting, you can see that if you look right here, let me use a magnifying glass here. You can look this up anywhere if you try to find ancient genetics at different times. This is going to be in the Neolithic, early Neolithic. You can see right here what they call Neolithic. So just to get an idea on that time there, it's actually, they'll say 5,000 BC, 4,000 BC, it's a long time ago. We go further back too, and you can see right here, you see T's already up here. You see all types of things in high areas. The yellow, I put a little, let me actually click this so you can see the whole thing. The reason why I'm showing this, because it's important to know what we're looking at is we're going to look at the codes in blood. The codes in blood, without pigmentation, we can actually understand what is the truth behind where people was without pigmentation. So you can see right here, yellow is going to be your Japhetic. That's going to be T. R, I found out that was Japhetic. That's going to be your J. And then your green is going to be Shemitic. It's going to be E1B1B. Because on ancient genetics, I actually found something very interesting. E1B1B, which is actually a branch from E1B1A, being a brother pretty much close to. E1B1A, in a sense, is actually going to be down here. It's usually going to be in the Levant. But E1B1B reached all the way up here, which there's also different reasons why it got up here, which is recorded in history. So you can see E lineages over here and over here. Really interesting because, they say that the E lineage, is African, but finding it in ancient genetics up here is very interesting. Now, if you notice the yellow arrows right here are T's. This is actually a lineage they say is actually of Israel, but it's not. It's not, because look how high it goes up to. It's in different areas. And we also can find it in an abandoned place far off to the area where you actually see the Mongols, when the Mongols at in ancient times, with some E lineages all the way over there. Very interesting. Why are they over there? Why are they mixing? Because actually, you actually find a lot of E1B1B, which is very interesting. E1B1B is actually found a lot. And I'm gonna open up something later, but before I drift off, because I can talk about this stuff all day on how it's without doubt when we look at ancient genetics, what's going on here. Also, what's important is this J lineage, this R one, this red one. This is going to be the J lineage. I didn't even touch on the R because we know that's European, without a doubt. This lineage right here, this red one, you see how it's on these different areas. Now, what's interesting about that is in Greece. It's in Greece. It's in Italy. It's in Armenia. It's found with the how you call the people from the invasion of the sea peoples. They're found in Sidon. They're found in the area where you see the pretty much how you say necessarily what is it? Philistines, the area of the Philistines. It's found
Right,
in all
right.
these areas. So not to get too far on that, because I want to focus on something else. I just want you to know that these are going to be Japhetic, just to make that solid. And so from D right here, you're going to get a split of E1B1A, and then you're going to get a split of E1B1B. Those are going to be different lineages on different tracks of life, different tracks that happen with these ones. So I just want to show you that from CT, you're going to get from CT, you get DE and CF. That's going to be your Japhetic from CF, and DE is going to be Shemitic. You're also going to note with D, it's going to be your Japanese. And then you're going to get from B, T, A, and B lineages. Now, when you see this thing like this is another subject. So I'm not going to go into it right now, but just know your Hamitic lines are A and B for the sake of understanding. So I want you to see that. I just want you to see that these three splits are actually known by mainstream science. Science knows about these three splits. So this is going to be one of those things when you look into is evidence of life in the blood. It's evidence. It's almost like the Lord has put it there to be revealed in these times, because with the complex ability, in fact, the ability to study ancient DNA is rare. So what's great is they don't have to worry about digging up all these finds. All they have to do is test the finds that they already have. And that's what makes this very interesting. That's what makes the studying of ancient genetics interesting. So I'm gonna actually let Will lead, and I'm gonna follow after there, and I'll just highlight on different things that are very I think it's interesting.
So the brother said something very important there. He basically let us know that the E branch was indeed Semitic. But how can we prove that? That's what we're here to do. We're here to basically show plenty of resources and information showing that the native DNA of us Afro Americans was not in Africa, right? So what I'm gonna go ahead and do is share my screen, and we're gonna get to it, and I'm gonna let the brother join in whenever and add to.
That's right.
So let's go ahead. So the earliest time, or I guess you can say one of the latest times or most ancient times that you can find our DNA is not even in Africa, but rather the Levant, all right, amongst the people known as the Natufians. Now, these people did not name themselves the Natufians. It was just a name given to the people that inhabited the Levant during this time. It says there's archaeological evidence and physical anthropological evidence for a relationship between the modern Semitic speaking populations of the Levant and the Natufians. All right. So we see off jump that these Natufians are being related to modern Semitic speaking peoples. We dig into that some more. We see that as with other Natufian subjects, opinions tend to emphasize North African connections or Asian connections. The view
Mm-hmm.
that the Natufians spoke an Afro-Asiatic language is accepted by Vitali. All right. Also, it says Alexander and others have argued that the Natufians may represent the culture that spoke the Proto-Afro-Asiatic language. So that means they spoke the first Afro-Asiatic language. All right. It goes on to say the possibilities of Natufians speaking Proto-Afro-Asiatic and that the languages was introduced into Africa from the Levant is approved by Colin with caution as a possible hypothesis for this Proto-Afro-Asiatic dispersion, right? So we're going to be showing that this hypothesis is true.
Interesting.
Now, when they did DNA studies on these people of the Natufians, they found that the Natufians carried the Y DNA haplogroups such as E1B1B1 or B12, also CT and E1B1, right? E1B1 will be the progenitor of our haplogroup, right? He fathered E1B1A and as well as E1B1B. It goes on to say that this haplogroup is found primarily amongst North Africans and Sub-Saharan Africans, all right? Even if we take it over to the actual genetic study, we see once again that the Natufians did carry E1B1B, which was the father or the ancestor of E1B1A, and E1B1B is mentioned. All right. So now we're going to connect these people to the Afro-Asiatics to just basically show that these people that carried that E branch were indeed known to be Asiatics
Can I
during this Bronze Age.
can I talk on the those lineages that's found there?
Yes, go ahead.
You know what's interesting about those lineages that's found there? There's a quote. I got a very interesting quote about the E1B1B lineage. Let me just read that quote. I don't need to show my screen, but this quote, I'll just tell you, or I could show my screen too, just to show you where the quote is from. But you can find it easily. This is worded like this. So if you ever see a page, basically Europe basically it's spelled like this. The page is EUPEDIA.com. If you go to that, it has all types of maps, putting a bunch of genetic information, showing you where they are on the maps and everything. But this is what they say. They basically talks about one of the things in basically 2016. It says, this is what it's going to basically say here. It says, tested the first ancient DNA samples from the Mesolithic Natufian culture in Israel, right? Now, watch what it says here. Possibly the world's oldest, basically, stationary community, right? And it says, and found that the male individuals belonged either to groups, haplogroups, CT or E1B1, including two E1B1, B1, B2 samples. These are to date the oldest known E1B1B individuals in the Levant, right? They told us that these Natufians, their culture is found in Israel. Let us notice the oldest one. It says the same haplogroups show up in pre-pottery Neolithic B Jordan, accompanied by new haplogroups H2 and T. So it just let us know that those are the ones that came in that time. So I'll just post that on here so you can see that too.
And that's very important, like the brother brought out. It was found amongst the Natufians, these early peoples of the Levant. Now, keep in mind, our oral traditions tell us that we come from the Levant. On top of that, we see that our DNA is actually in the Levant. But what we have to do is make sure that these people were indeed Asiatics, or at least the progenitors of these peoples, of Shem, or of the Semitic speaking peoples, essentially. All right, so we're going to jump to this book real quick, Origins of Semosis. And of course, I will leave the links in the bio after we get done for you all. But it goes on to say that the Natufians spoke the Afro-Asiatic language just before this language started to disintegrate into daughter languages such as Semitic, Cushitic, and Chadic. All right. So what does that mean if they spoke Afro-Asiatic languages? And it goes on to mention something very interesting down here. It says linguistics were the first to show that Indo-Europeans inhabited some territory in the Near East, later known as Anatolia, some 8 millennia ago, and that they were strongly influenced by both Semites, the descendants of the above mentioned Afro-Asian, and by Hurry Caucasians. All right. It says Indo-Europeans borrowed from them many cultural words, designations of various domestic animals and plants, tools, religious terms, and so on. So could this be where you get those Ashkenazis today from and all these other Europeans in the Levant? That's just a question proposed. We jump to in high pursuit of language in prehistory. We see that since there is archaeological and physical anthropological reason to believe that Natufians were related to modern Semitic speaking people of the Levant, I suggest that some part, if not all, the Afro-Asiatic families originated in North Africa proper. Since the Natufian culture dates to 10,000 to 12,000 years ago, it is suggested that the age of the Afro-Asiatic language family might be about that old. All right. So again, just comparing the Natufians to the Asiatics, saying that both of their cultures and languages are the same, basically the same years amount old, or dates back to the same era. Continuing on to this article of this study known as Genome Insight into the Origin of Farming in the Ancient Near East. It lets us know that the Y chromosome analysis showing that the Natufians and successor Levantine Neolithic populations carried haplogroup E. All right, so analysis shows us that Natufians and successor Levantine Neolithic populations carried haplogroup E. All right, so once again, us African Americans, us West Africans, us Sub-Saharan Africans, we are haplogroup E. And we see that at some point in time, it was dominant or carried throughout the Levant area.
That's right. It was the major lineage in the Levant. Also, would I be able to add to this?
Oh
I
yeah,
actually
go
want to.
ahead.
So I want to show something real fast. I just want to break down the exact break and what we actually find here, and then the change. The reason why I say the change, because we actually got from different periods of time in the Levant a subclad, right? The thing about haplogroups, you're gonna start getting more branches and more branches, and you're gonna get this thing that's gonna happen. Just if you could show that screen real fast. All right, let me show you. Let me show you something real fast. I'm gonna go up here, and I'm gonna show you something real fast. So remember how he pulled up some of the genetics in that land? Now, obviously, you know, when you're looking at the Natufian, it doesn't take much to find, but you know, if you don't know, if you never heard of the Natufian, how would you ever search for the Natufian? Such a strange word, you know, Natufian. What is it actually named after? It's named after the Judean mountain. Natuf actually just basically is the name of the mountain, and Ian is just meaning the people of the Natufian mountain, pretty much. Now,
Very
what's
interesting.
interesting, yeah, and pretty much what's interesting about it, we can actually look at what genetics is there in the Natufian mountain. Let me actually show you real fast the genetics. Let me find it right on here on the page. The reason why, because I want to show you how it changed. And what we want to look at is this one. You see this one, E1, B1, A1. So note that it's only E1, B1, A1. Now, when they get these, they like to do something like you know how you ever see, sometimes they do the test and they got a big Y test. Let me show you something. Well, not that first. Let me actually go show you in another time period. Before I show you that, let me show you this picture right here. Now, the reason why I want to show you this picture, because I want to show you an idea. Now, understand these years are grossly, what's the word I'm looking for? Exaggerated. But know that this is ancient times. It's just talking about ancient times. So see right here, as far as so-called 13,000 years ago, all the way up to almost 9,000 years ago. Now, I want to show you something. Notice that in the Natufian, you see E1, B1, A1, right? And then notice as it progressed, you know, all the way to because the Natufian is early on, right? Late Natufian right here. And then you got something called the pre-pottery B time right here. So I'm going to show you what happened in a span of so-called, you know, thousands of years. And I'm going to show you how we know it's not actually that long. It's actually going to be very close to the time of Israel. And I'm going to show you that based on the subclad. Now, see this subclass right here. E1, B1, A1, 1, C2, C3, B1. You see that long subclad right there? Mm-hmm. Now, what's interesting is when people take the big Y test, they actually come very close to a subclad that's like this. In fact, the oldest one that we have, I'm going to show you. When I say the oldest one, what's interesting about the Y chromosome is that at one point in time, it froze in place. I'm going to show you basically what that means, how it froze in place. At one point in time, there was a time where basically the lineages were spreading and constantly spreading. And then at some point in time, it stopped. It basically stopped spreading, and it pretty much became one of those things that it just froze. It just froze in time. Long story short, it's right here, right up here. Let me actually click that so we can see this. I just want to show you basically what it said on this thing. Just let it pop up in a second. And the reason why, because I want to show you these subclasses. Now here's a long, these are long subclads. And now look at how long they are. And they look very similar, as you can see right here. Now, the reason why I'm saying that is because how long this subclass is. See how long it is? What makes it interesting is that's fairly recent. That'd be very recent for such a mutation like that, because it's very close to the other subclasses. Let me go over. I'm going to show you also how we know right here. All right, so This is actually this where you say TRCA. Basically, it's gonna say, you know, the time of. Actually, forgot exactly how that. That's why I saved the abbreviation, because they always try to change it. Short term, repeat, all those things, whatnot. It's basically just talking about the STRs. I'm not gonna make it too complex and whatnot, but basically just understand this. It's just basically saying. I actually need the C on there. I want to show you word for word with the understanding of it, because this one, you know what they like to do? They like to make little abbreviations that are fairly interesting when looking at these things. So it's always good to see those abbreviations. They usually put them right on their page too for those abbreviations. And I want you to see how that's worded first. Let me make sure it's on one of these. Okay, right here. So you see where it says TMRCA? That's actually going to be the T, most, M, recent, R, common, C, ancestor. You see right there? Mm-hmm. So the most recent common ancestor. Now we got the understanding. Let's understand what it's saying here. The most recent common ancestor for E1B1A as a whole was estimate at. Now watch what it's saying here. It's letting us know about this, how far it goes. That this is what they say. This is what they try to say, that E1, the common ancestor, is 6,175,000 years ago. That's how they say it's the most recent common ancestor. It says with the watch what it says here, the TMRCA, right? The basically what we just seen, right? For the youngest. Now watch what the youngest one. The reason why I want to show you the youngest one, because I want you to see the subclad of it. They're saying this is the youngest. What does it mean by the youngest? What does the youngest mean? The youngest mean the recent one that froze in time. The Y chromosome actually froze in time. They say it froze about 1,000 years ago, just to make it a good round number, about 1,000, 2,000 years ago. So to be exact, 1,100 to 1,635 years before present, YBP. So that's actually important to understand. The most recent common ancestor for the youngest haplogroup is this one. Look at this subclad. E1B1A8 A1A. That's ever since the chromosome froze. That's where it froze at. And they say the most recent common ancestor. That's how they say. They say how far back E goes is only 6,000 years. That's how they say. They say, and yet you know what they tried to do when they brought out the Natufian? I'm gonna tell you the truth. What they tried to do when they brought out the Natufian, they tried to say that the Natufian are not related to the people that actually went to sub-Saharan Africa. But the thing is, that's a fact. It's a fact. They try to say, you seen that? They've been exactly. So you see, this is actually going to be on the big Y test right here. I want to show you something. This is going to be on family tree DNA. So this is obviously individuals that took the big Y test. They like to put them at the top because they like their money. So this is the big Y test. The big Y test, that's $700. It's an expensive test. Look at this long subclad. Look at this long subclad of someone today. You see how long this subclad is? Let's compare that. Let's compare that back to the one. So remember, they said this was the recent common ancestor. They said this was the recent common ancestor, because you'll see them slip up. This is what happens when they try to lie. They always slip up. You're always gonna find something that's gonna show you. So the recent common ancestor is only 6,000 years ago, and it froze about 1,000 years ago. Think about that. So in the Natufian DNA, let's look at that. You see, this is the one in the Natufian, but then we look at the one after many different years back. Where is that one? Right here, I think. Actually, this is the one at E up here, right here. So you see this one right here? I'm gonna post this on here. I want you to see them side by side. Can you see this pretty good? I'm gonna see if I can zoom in on this page. I want you to see them side by side next to each other. I want you to see these things side by side. So you see this one right here? I'm gonna put one right here next to this Wikipedia quote right here. I didn't mean to put that one. Let me go back and copy the other one. Let me show you this one right here. Let me copy this, because I want you to see them next to each other, because I think it really makes a something when you see them next to each other. Look at this. You see how many branches this has, and how many branches this has. Mm-hmm. These are fairly recent next to each other. These are fairly recent. These are actually fairly recent. In fact, look at how close they are. E1, B1, A1, right? E1, B1, A1, A1C. You see what's going on there? E1, B1, A1A. So you see they're very close branches. And notice that these branches right here, as long as these branches, and those are done in a the big Y test. Because usually when you take the test, you know how much information they're going to give you. They're not going to give you this much information. Usually they're going to give you, I'm going to scroll down and show you. So they don't show you like these type of details. This is actually what they usually show you if you get the cheat test like this. Just get a little bit of information. You don't get subclads and stuff like that. So you almost like in a guessing game. And that's what a lot of times when they brought in the Natufian, they didn't bring out so much, but it kept on coming out and coming out and coming out. And so they just kept on, this is what we actually found. So you're going to see some very interesting things, even with L. So very interesting to see those subclads together like that. So I just want to show you that in that quote. I just want to show you that in that quote that these years are extremely exaggerated. I just want you to know that really when you actually see the figures and what was actually there, you'll see some very interesting stuff with these things. So very, very interesting with those things. So I just want to show you that subclad is that E lineage that actually is there, most likely not that long. It's been there for less than 6,000 years.
Go on. So thank you for expounding on that for sure. So let's continue on real quick. So like the brother was bringing out what he said earlier, the main thing we need to realize is that, as it stated, the Natufians, as well as successor Levantine Neolithic populations, carried haplogroup E. So the question is, how did this haplogroup get into North and Sub-Saharan Africa if it was originally in the Levant? All right, so we're going to jump over to the article, The Prehistory of a Dispersal, the Proto-Afro-Asian or Afro-Asiatic Farming Lexicon. All right, it lets us know that the Proto-Afro-Asian speakers can be identified with high probability with the creators of the Natufian and post-Natufian early Neolithic archaeological culture of the Levant. All right, so let me rephrase that. The Proto-Afro-Asian speakers can be identified with high probability with the creators of the haplogroup E within the early Neolithic archaeological culture of the Levant. So once again, we see these people who carry the haplogroup E being labeled as Afro-Asiatics or Proto-Semitics. All right. Continuing on, we're going to go to a YAP Center of African and Middle Eastern migration into northern India. First thing we see is it says first lineages belong to haplogroup D. Remember in the beginning, the brother was explaining to you all that E branched off from DE. All right. The thing about DE is that D went into Japan and other southeastern populations, while haplogroup E stayed in the Middle East, or it was confined to sub-Saharan Africa, the Middle East, and southern European populations. All right. So it goes on to say further analysis based on 4 additional SNPs revealed that all the YAP samples could be categorized under African or Middle East specific haplogroup E lineage. All right. So we see that they're labeling this as the so-called African or Middle East haplogroup lineage. Continuing on. Genomes, evolution, and culture. All right. Genomes, evolution, and culture. And remember, we just doing this to verify that the oral traditions of our people are accurate and it can be backed up with DNA. All right. It says past, present, and future of human mankind. We see right here, it says, for example, although DE, a Sapra haplogroup, has been postulated to have its origins in East Africa approximately 65,000 years ago, more recent reports indicate an Asian origin and an introduction into Africa later. The same can be said about haplogroup E, a descendant of DE. So just like an Asian origin and an introduction into Africa was introduced with haplogroup D, the same can be said about haplogroup E. All right, haplogroup E has been postulated to originate in East Africa and Asia. All right, haplogroup E has been postulated to originate in East Africa and Asia by 2 independent research groups. If indeed haplogroup E, the most abundant lineage in Africa, had its genesis in Asia, it represents the most successful migration of modern humans into Africa. And
Now, I want to
go
make a
ahead.
comment on that real fast because you see that word right there. You see how you said right there where it says haplogroup E has been. You see that word prostylated.
Mm-hmm.
What's also important. This is what geneticists like to do. They like to do an assumption game. It's also important to know what's an assumption and how they phrase their assumptions, because that word, I'm actually going to read you the definition of it, is basically suggestion. It's like a suggestion or to assume. That's actually what it is. The existence. It's to suggest or assume the existence, fact, or truth of something as a base for reason, discussion, or belief. That's important to understand that they actually don't have evidence of it because you can't have two places of origin. So you
Facts.
can see it's either Asia, which is going to be, when we say Asia, is also important to know when you think of Turkey and stuff like that. When they say Asia, they're actually talking about the Middle East and all that area. Nowadays, when they say Asia, they call that Asia. They call all the Middle East and all that area Asia, and all the way to Asia, to the East Asia. And then you're obviously going to have your, as they say, Euro-Asia, because it's right in the center where Europe is and Asia. That's why I say Euro-Asian. You'll see
Mm-hmm.
a lot of sayings like that, Euro-Asian. So very interesting. I'm glad you brought that there, because I just want to bring light to that what's speculation and what's going to be solid facts. What's going to be solid fact.
And another thing to take note to is when they say a back migration of modern humans into Africa, scientists, they believe that all man evolved out of Africa and
Exactly.
dispersed from Africa. But we know our Bible says something totally different.
That's right.
So what we're saying is we never was in Africa. We came from the Middle East, the Levant, Israel, and we went into Africa. That's what we are saying.
That's right. And if anyone's questioning that, if you believe in the word, you already know that the Euphrates River has been talked about throughout all history, and it never left the Middle East, as that's the promised land that's given to Abraham from the river of Egypt to the river of the Euphrates.
Facts. So going to continue on to the next study. It's called Carriers of Mitochondrial DNA, Macrohaplogroup L3, Basic Lineages, Back Migration into Africa from Asia around 70,000 years ago. All right, remember, the Bible does not agree with people or all the sons of Noah migrating out of Africa. All right, and correct me if I'm wrong. L3 would be our women's, majority of our women, right?
Yep, L3 would actually be the Shemitic line, the direct one that was found in Syria.
All right, so we about to dig into that. It says the split of Y chromosome composite DE haplogroup is very similar to the age of mtDNA L3. A Eurasian origin and back migration to Africa has been proposed for the African Y chromosome haplogroup E. All right, so we keep saying that this haplogroup is outside of Africa. Inside Africa, frequency distributions of material L3 and paternal E lineages are positively correlated. All right, so that's basically letting us know that they migrated together.
Mm-hmm.
That's very interesting. We have two Semitic branches migrating together. Where are they coming from? It says this correlation is not fully explained by geographical or ethnic affinities. It seems better to be the result of a joint and global replacement of old autochthonous male and female African lineage by the new Eurasian incomers.
And that's something.
That's definitely something. That's letting us know that all the old, right, African lineages were wiped out or taken over or substituted by the male and female African lineages. I mean, by the male and female lineages of Asian incomers. All right.
That's
Those
right.
so-called Eurasian incomers would be those possessing haplogroup E and L3. So that's very important.
That's right. And also to expand on that, what's also interesting, how it's also important to know for some things that they don't want to be true, they also use terms of in the sense of trying to say it's speculation.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also important to know how can you find a solid piece of information to know that that's what we're actually looking at. Are we actually ensuring that we're looking at some real genetics of ancient peoples in that time? And it's also important to know we do have information of that L3 directly. And that's what's important to know. What's speculation and what is solid fact? What do we have solid fact of? And we do have a very interesting quote. I want to actually show you this real fast, because this quote is actually fairly interesting. Just let me know when you show
you up.
All right, so I want to read you something about the ancient DNA that's found in the Levant because that's actually talking about the female line now. So just to get a little idea on there, that was this person, basically, long story short, she basically had a find that she found, and she hid it. I'm just going to tell you the truth, that she actually hid the truth, and not just her, but someone hid it. Someone hid the publication when it was first published in 2008. And if you ever see any quotes that say the L lineage never left Africa or things like that, it's because the information for L3, you got to look after 2014, because after it says right here. So, and this is on this right here. And if you also want this, I'll get this to Will if you want the pretty much some of these things on these things, the sources and stuff. Right here, watch what it says here. It just says, so a first publication of the results in 2008 was corrected. It said it was corrected because they was basically talking about, long story short, they didn't bring out all the lineages, because what they first showed was one lineage, but it actually had other lineages. And the reason why it was controversial, because there's one lineage that they were trying to sell as part of the out of Africa idea, which is the L3 lineage. But you're going to see right here, it says, in the latter publication of MT haplogroups were given as U, R, O, K, H, V, H, N, and L3. Now, what's interesting is that this location is in this place called, as you see right here, Tel Halula. That's actually important to know where that is. If you look on a map, you actually will see that would be up in this area up here. So you actually will see it basically on Syria, pretty much. In fact, I don't know why this thing is moving so fast, but I'm gonna click right here, maybe get right to it. So right here, you can see it's actually one of the major areas where you find Natufian genetics. And these areas where you see you see this Euphrates. And remember, the scripture actually talks about this is where Abraham's family was. Abraham's family was up here. Remember, he told the person who was with him, he said, don't get a wife for my son from the land of Canaan, which I dwell. He said, go back to his homeland where his family is. And that's where his family was. So that's where we find that L3, just to show you the exact pinpoint right above Syria. And remember, a word for word tells us that the women were from, where they was reigning in Syria. So right there where Syria is, right where the Euphrates is, that's where they found that L3, just to have a solid piece. And that's ancient genetics. What's also important, this don't tell you the time, but they also tested the time to tell you the time. And I'll just quickly tell you that real fast. And also that back migration and everything that was talked about. Just know that the L3, that's the oldest place that is found is in the Levant. Just right here, you can see it's they talk about based on the age, basically, of L3, from which it says from which all basically, what's that? Basically maternal, Euro-Asian, and the majority of African lineages originated. Now it's let us know that they say your Asian and your so-called African lineages originated, because L3 is going to be where you see most. Israel, you're going to find that mostly in them. You can actually see right here that out of Africa, watch what it says here, that out of Africa event has been dated around. So when was the out of Africa event in their chart? It says about 60 to 70,000 years ago. Why? Why do they say it's only 60 to 70,000 years ago? Why do they want it to be around there? Because they don't want the Europeans to be African. They don't want them to have to been in Africa, but they want them to be like people that are always been in Europe, and the Africans are a lower people that was just never up there. But what they found out with L3, it says on the opposite side, we have proposed a northern route throughout Central Asia across the Levant for that expansion. What it's talking about for L3, it actually doesn't date to around that time. It actually says that even older than what they trying to date it to. They say right here, it says it's consistent with fossil records. We have dated it around, they say 125 basically 1,000 years ago. Now, what's important about that shows that in their model, it wouldn't fit with their out of Africa idea. It went because they also found it in the Levant. That's what's important to note too. They didn't find it in Africa. They found it in the Levant. That's what makes it important. And that it's older than their time frame. So that means it was solid in the Levant. That's what it means. That's basically what that means. If anyone ever says like L3, this thing or that, it just basically says it ends like this: to help bridge differences between the molecular and fossil record ages. In this article, they just talk about, testing those things and whatnot. And then they also talk about how L3 matured in Eurasia and returned to Africa in basic L3 lineages around 70 KYA. So it came to Africa. So that's actually the solid piece instead of the hype, the thinking, but actually the solid piece.
And the key note is majority of our women are L3, L2. So there you go.
Amen. You finna expound? I don't know if you already finna expound on how the E lineage is also related or linked with the L lineage.
Somewhat. It's going to get into that somewhat. If not, you can go more into it, brother.
All right. I'm gonna expound and then I'm gonna let it see what's gonna happen, because it most likely gonna expound on this. But let me show you also with that L. This is how we know the L lineage was part with the lineage with the people, because remember, he was just reading. You see that word? How do you say that? I never can pronounce this word.
Either. Yeah. Autochthonous.
Autochthonous. Even when I put it in the thing and try to listen to it, autochthonous is whatever. That sounds good. I like how that sounds. But it just talks about right here. Long story short, you can find it in multiple quotes with these things. Remember, I was talking about that one in 1,025 years ago. It says, E carrying males are thus proposed to have back migrated from the pretty much the father's haplogroup place of origin. So where's his place of origin? Levant. The Levant is the place of origin. Place of origin in Eurasia around 70 KYA. So they're saying that they came to Africa, along with females bearing the female line of haplogroup, right? mtDNA, L3. So he's saying the E and the L was moving together. They were together the whole time, which the study also, this one has an idea to have originated in Eurasia. Now, obviously, that's what we're going to look at today, because we already saw we solidly confirmed that L3 is from the Levant. You can also see that E is also from the Levant. It's confirmed with ancient genetics. You can see these new Eurasian lineages were then suggested to have largely replaced the autosynonymous male and female African lineages. Now, remember, the definition of some of these words is important. It's more about the definition than the word. This actually means that the people from Eurasia replaced the indigenous rather than descendant from migrants and colonists. They replaced the original inhabitants of Africa. And what lineages did the original inhabitants of Africa have?
Mm-hmm.
It says, we can look at that in different places too. Traces of early inhabitants, however, can be observed today in these regions via the presence of the Y DNA haplogroups A1A, A1B, A2, A3, and BM60. None of that is the E lineage, and you can find that in a certain groupings. And none of those are the E lineage, but those are going to be the original inhabitants of Africa. Those are going to be the original inhabitants of Africa. Also, those are going to be some of your, that's right, original Hamites. Also, we know that they're original Hamites because we also can find them in the land of Sidon. If you look in the land of Sidon, you see your A and B lineages. You see A's and B's in the land of Sidon, which was the land that was owned by the Canaanites. Also with the invasion of the Sea peoples, which had predominantly J that came down there. So you can see also the J that came into the land of Sidon. So there's actually ancient Sidon early on, looking at the digs in Sidon in the Bronze Age, BA. Sidon BA, Bronze Age. So it's really, really interesting to see that the Hamites are going to actually be your A lineages. And it's actually important to know that they were replaced. They were replaced by the E lineage that was coming down there.
That's right. An important thing to remember is that our people migrated together, men and women, right? We see the L3 lineages migrating with the E lineage. And that's very important because some of our brothers and sisters, they like to make the claims that we came into Africa and we took on women and we took on Hamitic wives and stuff like that. And if that was true, we shouldn't have women today still with this L3 lineage.
Yep,
But
and you know what's also interesting about that? The Bantu expansion, when they was going through, they were taking some of the Hamite women, but a lot of the Hamite women had L's. So whatever happened, something
mm,
happened at some point where a lot of the women of Israel and a lot of them around start mixing in a lot, and then you see, but you put the major one is actually L3. L3 is the one that's going to be that one that actually came from Israel. That's going to be Shemitic. That's going to be the pure Shemitic one. But you're going to also have your other lineages. Now, there's also some ideas on L2, but that's,
mhm.
different topic for another day. But you can see right here, your L3 and your L lineages, you're going to find them, as you can see right here. This is actually an idea. You're going to have almost like a third of that. So a third of the mothers is going to be from L3 and some, as you know, Ephraim and Manasseh, they had different mothers, right? So you have different ones like that sometimes. So you can have different lineages. So there's just the ones who they call African, yet they are actually going to be Euro-Asian. So you're going to see a lot of your L3s in them.
The brother asked, "Are Ethiopians and Somalians a haplogroup?" I guess he meaning what haplogroup are they mainly? Do you know that? I know some of them are E1B1B.
Yeah, I did a live because I thought it was really crazy. When you type down who are the Canaanites, and I kept seeing J groups, I'm like, how is it J Canaanites? We gotta do some digging on this. So we actually found out that the original Canaanites, we can look at their genetics. They're gonna be Hamites. So if the Hamites are gonna be A and B, and we find out that they're A and B, and we find out in Africa mostly A and B. The original Ethiopians is also important to know. They also have E1s living with them. They have E1B living with them. E1B1B living with them, and also sometimes E1B1A. But they're going to have your A and B lineages mainly, and that's also what we had talked about on one of the lives that I was going over, talking about the Canaanite, because the Canaanite DNA is crazy. It's the story behind the Canaanites. You probably know about it, like the Sea Peoples and stuff like that. That's
Mhm.
why I started getting into genetics with those things, because that was just crazy. I got a playlist Synthetic Sunday, but on there's a video if you want to like see a little bit more on the Canaanites and stuff and what happened and what happened with the Sea Peoples and stuff. There's a video right here. These two, basically the truth and so-called Canaanite DNA and the truth and so-called Phoenician DNA. And that's pretty much. I also talk about the original Arabs, and not the Arabs, the original Hamites, pretty much. I talk about how the original Hamites, we can look at their genetics, and we know that they're mainly B. They have mainly B in them. They have a lot of B, but we also have the Euro-Asian lineage. It's also important to note which one's Euro-Asian and which one's actually native to Africa or native to the Ethiopian being Hamite. So that's actually what we see, is that A and B lineage is actually going to be more of that lineage on those things. So that was one of those things that we had went over and talked about how is this thing happening, with the Canaanite DNA and all that stuff. I don't know if you've seen that already,
Right,
but
right. I'm sorry.
yeah, it's very interesting. So I guess the answer to that is going to be more your A's and B's for Hamites.
Okay, okay. All right. So yeah, we're gonna go ahead and continue. Let's see. All right. So like the brother said, this L3 lineage is indeed out of African origin, but we're gonna continue to expound on that. So it goes on to say, now, if we do admit that basic L3 lineages have independently evolved in Southeastern Asia instead of Africa or near the African continent borders, where the rest of the L3 lineage is expanded, all right, so they expanded that way. We are confronted with the dilemma of where the basic trunk of the L3 involved, a gravitational midpoint between Eastern Africa and Southeastern Asia, were situated the born of the L3 in Inner Asia, with possible opposite expansions back to Africa and forward to Eastern Asia. At this point, it has to be mentioned that the possibility has been already modeled among other options obtaining the highest likelihood value. But in our opinion, it has not received the attention it deserves. All right. The parallelism of the early back to Africa of the mtDNA haplogroup L3 with that proposed for the Y chromosome E is striking. All right. And remember, the Bible does not agree with out of Africa. Um migrations. All right.
That's right.
So continue on. It says, furthermore, as the Colonization age of the African L3 branch and that of the Eurasian L3. All right. So how can you have an African branch and a Eurasian and they not be same? All right, are very similar. And around 71 KYA, the temporal and spatial midpoint might also coincide, as the group of modern humans that hypothetically turn back to Africa should include females and males searching for the rock chromosome, phylogenetic or phylogenetic and phylogeographic information might give us additional information. All right. Indeed, an origin in Asia and return to Africa was proposed long ago for the Y chromosome haplogroup E. All right. So this has been talked about or known for a long time that this Y chromosome haplogroup E is of so-called Asian or the Levant origin. All right. Continuing on, it says this geographic distribution confirms that the history of Africa is marked by multiple Eurasian migratory waves that pushed the first carriers of female haplogroup L3 and haplogroup E basic lineages inside Africa.
Yeah.
Let me read that one more time for you all. Eurasian migratory waves pushed first carriers of female haplogroup L3 and haplogroup E basic lineages inside of Africa, meaning it was a wave of these people inside of Africa.
That's right. And remember, Eurasian is in the center of Europe and Asia. So that's actually talking about the Middle East.
So once again, we keep coming to the conclusion that this lineage is not from Africa, but went into. And even throughout the Bible, we can verify people from the Levant or so-called Israel going into Africa, different migrations, different times. That's how we got Jason of Cyrene, Lucius of Cyrene, Simeon of Niger, these type of things.
Yeah.
This is important right here. It goes on to say, it seems that E and L2/L3 expansions were strongest in the Western Sahel and in Western Guinea, where they substituted the majority of the oldest mtDNA, right, which on the female side was L0 and L1, and the Y chromosome, which on the male side was A and B, like the brother just pointed out, that these are Hamitic lineages. So
That's right.
even in Western Africa, when we came into Western Africa, right, Western Guinea, we replaced all those Hamitic lineages or substituted them.
That's a great read. Could you read that one more time? Because this one, pay attention to what this is just what we just went over.
Exactly
The A and B
what we just went
lineages are the
over.
Hamite ones.
Fact. I'm gonna read from the top. It says, it seems that the E and L2 expansions were strongest in the Western Sahel, all right, Western Sahara and the Western Guinea, where they substituted the majority of the oldest mtDNA L0 and L1 and the Y chromosome A and B lineages, all right?
Amen. That's a great find because right there shows L2 and L3 being together. So that's what I was talking about. L2 and L3. That's a great find right there. That's a screenshot.
So boom, there we have it. We came into these areas, all right, where A and B was already there, right? So again, this Semitic DNA came into these locations, family.
That's right.
Now, we've already pointed out that our DNA, the oldest findings of our DNA goes back to the Natufians, who have been proven or compared to be the fathers or the Proto-Afroasiatic peoples, all right, the Proto-Semites. So with that, we can go to this article right here, right, the Y chromosome E haplogroups, their distribution and implications to the origin of Afro-Asiatic language and pastoralism, all right? It says the Proto-Afroasiatic group carrying the EP2 mutation. All right. So EP2, that would be the father of E1B1A, E1B1B, correct, brother?
That's right. So that's right. That'll be the father of those. That'll bring forth E1B1A and E1B1B.
All right. So that mutation may have appeared at this point in time and subsequently gave rise to different major population groups, including current speakers of the Afroasiatic languages and pastoral populations. So
that's a great find.
So once again, our haplogroup is associated with the Semites, with the Afroasiatic peoples. The question is, how can one branch be Semitic and one not if they both came from the same place? We're going to go over to another study called Challenging the Fundamental Premises of White Supremacy. DNA documents the Jewish origin of the New England colony. And it's funny because we find within this, it says something about, as already discussed, EM35 is recognized as a Semitic haplogroup. EM35 is recognized as a Semitic haplogroup originating in the Middle East and is a founding lineage of Jewish people. Now, the funny thing is, this is E1B1B.
That's right.
Right? So that is E1B1B. And we see that even they are claiming that this is a Semitic haplogroup. Not
Isn't
to
that,
mention,
is that something?
that is something because it's only found in these European Jews. Notice they don't have our lineage. They don't have E1B1A, but rather they have E1B1B.
And that's really interesting because what's also interesting about E1B1B, if I can actually show something real fast, I'll show something real fast.
Come on.
I'm gonna show you now. I made a picture. I took basically a whole bunch of haplogroups of different places and I merged them together into one picture. And it's absolutely, when you look at it and you understand it, it's absolutely groundbreaking because it's basically a list of Turks with the Ashkenazi, with many different groups that would be Turks, like Iranian Turks, basically the Turks that's from Turkey. As we know, those are Turks from Turkey that had settled in that area when the Ottomans had ended at their course. They also pushed the Greeks out, so we know that they were the Turks that was basically to themselves in that area. But what's interesting here is this showing is the screen. You can see the screen.
Oh yeah, you good.
So look at here. I'm gonna just zoom in. Notice on this is the Ashkenazi. This is gonna be the Ashkenazi Y chromosome, or they say of the Jews. You see this right here, EM35. That's gonna be right here. This is one of the second largest haplogroup found in the Ashkenazi community. And what makes it interesting is that they actually call it, these are ones, now they actually will look whiter skin. When I say whiter skin, they're gonna be like no pigmentation, lighter skin. They're not gonna have pigmentation. They're gonna look like you're like a Caucasian. The reason why is because the constant mixing that had happened. And the reason why that had happened, if you notice with E lineage, it was actually seen in the north all the way to where you actually get some places with the Mongolians and stuff like that. And you have J hanging out together in different areas. I'll open up something and go to something on a map and show you where we actually see in ancient maps and ancient genetics where they place them. E and the J basically kind of like mingled in this little kind of like a hangout place by the Mongolian area, which is very strange to see them all hanging out there. But that's how they end up mixing. They end up was basically mingling and with the people in the Mongolian area, and that E lineage ended up coming out when they came out because these were what they call the barbarians, but the ones that converted during the time. And what's interesting too, you got multiple haplogroups in the Ashkenazi community. If they was Israel, you wouldn't have this many haplogroups. Why? Because they had to come from one father. These are actually multiple fathers. These are leading to multiple different fathers. So that's very important too.
Yeah. Like he was saying, if they were Israel, they would be like 90% E1B1A. You feel me?
Yeah, exactly.
And we not saying that they came from the Middle East at all because they got that E haplogroup. We saying that they mix with our brother clade somewhere in history.
That's right.
That's all. And that's why they are really claiming Semitic DNA, because they do have a piece of Semitic, you feel me, DNA by way of that E1B1B branch.
That's right. So they can basically get away with saying, they're Shemitic because some are technically the quote unquote Shemitic. But in the sense, in majority, as we says, actually more in the sense of like 70% are gonna be more of your R and J's and Q's and T's like that, different branches. But those are not gonna be Shemitic. Those are gonna be Japhetic lines. But you're gonna have a small portion that's Shemitic, but that's not Israel. That's not Israel. The E1B1A is Israel because we can follow that one. But this one's actually gonna be more different. Not Israel, but Shemitic. As remember, Edom, Moabites, Ammonites, the Ishmaelites, the ones from the sons from Keturah. These are all in those areas, and that's why the E lineage is all found out in the Natufian area throughout the whole area. when you look at the whole area of the map. And it's also important to know they were all related. And that's one of the biggest pictures that the Ashkenaz, they can't paint that picture in the Levant. They can't paint a picture of where everyone was, where their lineage was. But with the lineage of the pretty much E lineage, you can paint that picture perfectly. That's what's very interesting to see. So that's why I just wanted to talk about that. That E lineage is also found, we can see it in a large portion. That's what makes it very interesting, a large portion in the, what they call the Ashkenazis. You can see right there, that E lineage there. So very interesting to get an idea there.
There was indeed some type of mixing with the original black E1B1B holders at some point in time. So
yep, and it's almost in the same level is exactly is Psalms 83. It's Psalms 83 100%, because if you look at Psalms 83, it names all the groups that mingle and mix together. Remember Gog and Magog and all that stuff that's going to happen in Ezekiel and stuff. But you notice right here, you're going to have Ishmaelites and what they say. Remember in Psalms 83, where they talk about Ishmaelites and everything mixing with all the nations and stuff. You see what's going on, because you see that in Turks, you see that in all types of groups,
That's facts. That's facts. All right, so let's continue on. Well, yeah, fam, we're gonna continue to dig, man. We're gonna bring it out today. We're gonna bring out everything. But like as we was just saying, they recognizing this E branch as a Semitic haplogroup. How can one branch be Semitic and not the other one? All right, so recent African origin with hybridization and back to Africa 70,000 years ago is where we're going to next. Okay. 1 second, let me fix this. I'm finna stop my screen and I'm gonna get it to you real quick.
All right, yeah. If you could, I want to just I'm gonna read something from this quote from this pretty much this thing. I think it's fairly interesting. Let me actually open it up here. So this is just something I just wanted to let me see if this is the one I want to read. No, matter of fact, I want to find this thing. I'm gonna go down. In fact, up here, I want to find this thing. I want to show you this little bunch of groups mingling in the north of ancient of old. Let me just go over to one right here. This one is okay. I'm gonna go over to, matter of fact, let me just look at that early one. This is really early. This is the earliest we can get. I'm just gonna go to this map because it's gonna just show the genetics on the maps and everything. And I'm gonna go over here and see if it's this early. In fact, let me actually go back because I don't think it's this early. I don't think it's that early. But I was gonna show this thing real fast, and I'll go to the time where you actually start to get the Neolithic. Let's go here. I'm gonna show you what's going on here. Let's see if there's a one. Let's see if I get lucky and find it real quick. I want to show you it in this distance over here. It's usually easy to do on my phone, but I'm gonna zoom in and go over here and see if I can find this group because it's pretty crazy. Let's see. They just basically hanging out in the distance. That's the thing about this little zoom on this little thing. You just gotta find out where they at. Let's see if I can real fast. Let me see if it's right there, down there. So I see a group right there. All right, it might be this right here. I'm gonna zoom in and then I'm gonna zoom out to show you if this is it, because it's gonna have an E there if it is. All right, let's see. This is the K. It's not over here. Let me see. Let me just find that. Otherwise, I'm gonna look for it and I'm gonna show you because it's real interesting. You see the J over here? You can see this is gonna be the Caucasus Mountain right here. The Caucasus. You can see the J right there. This is ancient times. But that's not the one I want to show you. I want to show you one where they're bunched with the E. and that one is not in this time frame. So I'm gonna look in a different one, but it's over here. It's definitely over here, and they bunch together and they're basically doing whatever they're doing, and then they're mingling. And there's an E lineage, and I'm gonna talk about that when I find it because it's real interesting. I think you're gonna talk a little bit more on the E lineage, right?
Oh yeah, yeah, we got a few left.
All right,
Yeah,
and
we got some.
I'm gonna find this and I'm gonna show you because it's pretty interesting. It's pretty interesting to see them all bunched together like that. Let me go back. I'm gonna go back a little bit more to maybe this period right here. This is the time frame that I think I found that at. I just scanned over it and I didn't think too much of it. But now that we're talking about this, it makes me consider it a little more on why was it? Because I was wondering like why is that E over there? What is that E doing over there? And then now noting with the the Ashkenazim lineage, because that EM35 was also interesting about that is that's actually a older, when I say older, like basically from the start to where we are now, that's basically a lineage that came about fairly recently, and it's only found in the Ashkenazim, pretty much. Long story short, let me see if I can find it. It's such an interesting find. Let's see if I can find it. That's the only thing about this map is that you gotta like look for it. In fact, there's also a way to find it, but the way that it's on this, I won't be able to find it because I tried to type down the E1, but it won't let me go right to it. So I have to go right and find it. But whenever you want to talk about it, I'm gonna just keep looking for it, and when I get a chance to see it, I'm gonna show you. It's pretty crazy where the location is and what's going on there.
So whenever you just find it, just shout, and then we'll get to it.
All right, it's gonna be something else.
All right, so we're gonna continue on, but we see recent African origin with hybridization and back to Africa 70,000 years ago. All right, remember the Bible does not agree with the out of Africa theory. I'm gonna keep stressing that for whenever they try to make it seem like these people are migrating back to Africa.
That's right.
We see that let's see. We're gonna start up top. It says the coexistence and age of all Eurasian and African L3 lineages, both around 71 KYA, are most not significantly different. The oldest M and N Eurasian clades are found in southeastern Asia instead of near of Africa, as expected by the southern route hypothesis. The split of the Y chromosome composite DE is very similar to the age of the MT DNA L3. And Eurasian origin and back migration to Africa has been proposed for the African Y chromosome E. Inside Africa, frequency distributions and maternal L3 and paternal E lineages are positively correlated. All right. This correlation is not fully explained by geographic or ethnic affinities. This correlation rather seems to be the result of a joint and global replacement of the old autochthonous male and female African lineages by the new Eurasian incomers. All right, so we just read something similar to that, but I just wanted to shine a light on the fact that L3 and E indeed migrated into Africa together.
That's a solid thing right there. It says it's without a doubt. They said that's what you want to find when geneticists stop saying it's a thought and it's thought of. When they start saying it's sure. That means it's not going to change. That means a solid fact.
Facts. So let's see. We're going to continue on to this publication or this study. It's called "Punctuated Burst in the Human Male Demographic Inferred by 1,244 Worldwide Y Chromosome Sequences." All right. We see that it says we see a notable increase in the number of lineages outside of Africa, perhaps reflecting the geographic expansion and differentiation of Eurasian populations as they settled in vast expanse on these continents. Consistent with previous proposals, what is this word? Parson-anonymous interpretation of the phylogen is that the predominant African haplogroup arose outside the African continent or arose outside the continent. All right. So the African haplogroup arose outside the continent. This has been well proposed, well theorized, and well known. All right. So when we're talking about this E haplogroup, it arose outside of Africa. Now we saw that it was earliest dates in the Levant. The brother showed how it was even up near Iraq and Mesopotamia area, right? We shown how when it came in, it overtook the old Hermetic haplogroups and pushed them down further, right? So the question is, when did this haplogroup come into Africa?
Exactly. Exactly.
All right,
That's
and
that's what's important. Yeah.
right, and we're gonna find out that we're gonna go to ancestral DNA, human origins and migrations. All right. So let's see where we should start. We're gonna start up here, and basically that haplogroup came in with the Bantu expansion. All right, the haplogroup came in with the Bantu expansion, specifically our haplogroup. But we're gonna start up the top right here. It says it is thought that Bantus were not inventors of ironworking. In fact, excuse me, matter of fact, we're gonna start. Well, I'm gonna keep going. It says, in fact, there is no word for iron and ironworking in the ancestral Proto-Bantu language. It seems that they merely assimilated the technology from other tribes and transmitted it as they dispersed into different directions and established their domain. For this reason, iron implements are very useful as markers to help trace the Bantu expansion. All right, along these lines, it is not surprising that the location of the iron manufacturing sites in sub-Saharan Africa parallel very closely to the Bantu dispersal routes. Because iron is highly corrosive, ancient tools are not usually preserved well as part of archaeological findings. All right, some examples of ancient Bantu iron tools and weapons have been discovered. These artifacts most utilitarian in nature. All right, so the key point in reference in this is that iron is not native to sub-Saharan Africa. All right, this metal, this tool, or these weapons were brought into Africa by way of the Bantu expansion. All right, that's just something to throw in there, as well as matching it up with the DNA. It goes on to say, yet in addition, iron was used to make jewelry, artwork, coins, and various instruments. All right, indeed, some of those weapons the Bantus made.
So not only is it bringing in genetics, it's bringing in the culture, and you're seeing things that's not native to Africa coming into Africa with this culture that's coming down there, and that's noted too about that migration and that movement, because it's very interesting. Because I also have a quote from the Bantu expansion, like how we was talking about how they replaced the people there. That's a very interesting one because that quote I actually never seen before. And that's why it's a great quote, because when you can find stuff like that and bring that to the brethren, it may be something that no one never seen before, yet it just completely solidifies everything else with a bunch of different things. But I'm gonna just read a quote. It says, because the separation of two major waves from around 3,500 YBP years before present, and the sequent isolation of many groups, modern Bantu languages can be divided into West and East Bantu. It says, it is also suggested that although the Bantu-speaking agriculturalists may have replaced to a substantial extent hunter-gatherers in their paths, they have also in some places coexisted and interbred with the original inhabitants. Now, what's interesting is that coexistence, that bringing all that thing, that's bringing their culture in, and that's what's very interesting to see. It's very interesting to see that they're bringing that culture into Africa.
Right, because like the source said, they called the original inhabitants hunter-gatherers, right? Our ancestors were pastoralists. You get what I'm saying? We weren't hunter-gatherers. That were your native, that was your pygmies, your Khoisans, your Neolitics, those type of people.
Yep, that's right. The Natufian are the first people to make flatbread. They're your like home style living. They're like how we are. Like we sit in a house, and that's how the Natufian were.
Right. So it goes on to say it is not clear whether Bantu speakers were responsible for the introduction of these livestock, which we know they were, but it is known that as they migrated south, they took with them at least two species of cattle, the humpbacked, all right, and the flatbacked, as well as chicken and goats. Now, the thing is, none of these species are native to Africa.
That's right.
right? We know chickens not, we know goats not. These are so-called East Asian or Levantine animals. It goes on to say these early Bantus also brought with them agricultural technology, which included crops such as bananas, yams, coconuts, sorghum, millet, cowpeas, and melons, in addition to iron and copper metallurgy. All right. Although these domesticated species were transplanted or transported by the advancing Bantus along the eastern and western African streams, many had origins outside of Africa. So, where in the world did they get these from? If these people have been in Africa,
That's great. Did you just say? Let me. I was searching while I say right there. That's amazing right there. That last part where it says, although these dominant species, or how is dominated
oh, domesticated, yeah,
domesticated species were transported by the advancing Bantu, right? Bantus
hmm
people along the eastern and western Africa stream, right? It's really interesting to say many had origins outside Africa. Just that last part would say many had origins outside Africa. It's letting you know that animals even originated outside of Africa, and
right.
the
Even
fact, yeah,
go ahead. What you were saying, bro?
the fact that so much things are showing migration into, and remember, this is not just talking about Africa as in the upper Africa, where like like, oh, Europe, if you say like Egypt, right, you say it was trades with Egypt, but there was no trading going on with underneath Africa, because that's what they called, the Ethiopians. They had to come up to go do the trading and stuff, to go into like your major area, which was actually Egypt. Egypt was like one of your major areas at that time. But in West Africa, you didn't see a lot of this stuff going on. You just seen hunting and gathering. And then all this stuff, just all of a sudden, like a big migration of all this stuff just being shipped down there. This is why the Bantu, they call it Bantu expansion, is so interesting. I just never knew that all this also came with it. So that's
And if
really
you
interesting.
and if you take it back a step further, I've lined up the Bantu expansion indeed with the Assyrian captivity. So they would be migrating from that East Asian, whatever you want to call it, location in the first place
That's right. And that's
into
and that's what
Africa.
the genetics show. The genetics show is about that age.
Facts. And then also notice these melons, certain yams, bananas, all these things were not in sub-Saharan Africa as well, including iron and copper. So these were things that the Bantus brought into Africa. This agriculture and pastoralism, right? Remember that source we read earlier saying that the EP2 descendants brought in Afro-Asiatic languages and pastoralism. All right, the Bantus will be descendants of EP2.
There it is.
And we take it to this, and it gets very interesting because this article called "Evidence from Y Chromosome Analysis for a Late Exclusive Eastern Expansion of the Bantu-Speaking Peoples." We see of the possible 17 haplogroups, 12 were observed in the complete data set of haplogroup E1B1A model. All right, so what do they mean by 12 were observed in the complete data set of the haplogroup E1B1A model? That's just a question I threw out there, or that's just something I threw out there to just
That's a that's a great. You know what that actually means? Because what they did, I also have another quote that's expounds on that.
come.
What they actually did, they tried to find out, because they were trying to find Israel. They know they were trying to find Israel because they was testing to see where they could find 12 breaks, and where you can find 12 tribes and stuff like that. If they say there's 12 families and they of their own tribe, they're separating their own. That's what they're talking about. It's like 12 complete branches that pretty much come forth from the lineage of M2. So they just talk about after P2 comes, what was that, V38 or something like that. I mean, not V38. I gotta make sure I word the exact breaks, because after P2 comes another lineage, which I believe, yeah, V38. So P2, V38, and then your M2, which is M2 is actually E1, B1, A1. That's actually going to be your lineage that brings forth the lineage. Because at first, a long time ago, it used to be M2 used to be called E1B1A, but it's actually E1B1A1. From E1B1A1 comes 12 branches, pretty much what it's saying there. It's saying you could actually see a complete 12 branches that will come from it. It's basically saying they're closer to being Israel. I also have another quote.
Yeah, yeah.
Yep.
12 branches, 12 tribes of Israel. That seems very specific. What is it called? Direct to me.
Yep. And why they're saying that, because I got that quote like that, it basically reads, of the possible 17 haplogroups, because at that time they actually updated it. Now it's 20 haplogroups now, but at that time it was 17, because the haplogroups are just like A, B, C, all those letters. It's basically saying 12 were observed in the complete data set, not just in E, but in a direct line of E1B1A. That's what makes it very interesting. That it brings it all the way to directly E1B1A. That's what makes it important that 12 are actually observed in E1B1A. Also have another quote from that basically talks about it in short. It says 12 Y chromosomal subhaplogroups were observed in basically E1B1A. And that's another, these are two different sites that talk about those things. It just talks about how they had different 12 branches that basically would come from the line of E1B1A.
Right, right. And like I said, that's very interesting. That's very interesting. Specifically seeing that outline. Because they didn't mention any other E branch, like you said. They speaking on specifically E1B1A. So
yep, and that's what makes it very interesting, because it's not just E, is directly E1B1A. That's what makes it very interesting too.
right, right. So now what I'm about to do is I'm about to we gonna continue on, but we're about to take a little sidestep real quick, and we're about to go to exploring Sephardic lineages in Sao Tome and Principe, just so we can show you all that indeed even the Sephardic Jews had the same E branch as us.
That's right. And that's great to try to relate it to something that's more like well known in history, and find out if we can find their genetics in a place that they're known in.
Right, right. So it reads, Sao Tome Islands were probably uninhabited at the time of the Portuguese discovery in 1471. Soon after that, the first settlements took place in 1486 by John, who took with him many Jews. One of the most controversial episodes of this colonization was the forced migration of Jewish children in 1492. We already know what went on then. All right, several documents confirmed that many of these children survived along with many of the settlers. All right, we go on to see that when they did the DNA studies, he says among the European Y chromosomes, none were found to belong to the haplogroups J. All right, notice they like to say J is that Jewish marker, right? That Kohanim marker, right?
Yep, they
And
try to say
T,
that.
right? And T previously reported to have had high frequencies in Portuguese Jews. We go over, it says within the results that most DNA haplogroups detected in our sample are of African origin. And what we're going to see what they mean by African origin is that E1B1A. But continuing on, we go down here and it says literally, moreover, the punitive Jewish haplogroups J and T were not detected either. All right, so we not related to these European haplogroups. We like the brother already showed you all in the beginning, these two haplogroups are indeed of Japhetic, Caucasian, you know what I'm saying, stock. So the true Jews wouldn't possess this anyways unless it's by admixture. I forgot to add the chart in, but eventually the chart was basically saying that it was 86% E1B1B, I mean E1B1A of these children of Sao Tome.
Oh, I got you.
You
If
got
you
it?
give me
Yeah,
my
yeah, yeah.
screen,
Yeah,
I
you
can
can
show
put
you.
it
I
up.
got you on.
Yeah, put it up.
So what's also interesting, let me read this historical quote. You've probably seen it before, but I found a little private copy from another source. This was going to be one from 1884. It's going to be Critic Review of Annals of Literature, volume 57. Right, I'm going to go down right here. I'm going to read it on what it says here, and then I'm going to show you that thing real fast. So I'm just going to read this part right here. You probably already know about this, but I'm going to just read this because I think this is very interesting. It just talks about the Jews, right, being sent. Also, it's probably important to read who they were sent by and everything. So I'm going to click this so we can get a fair read of it. So it's not thought to be altered information or anything like that. Because as we do these things, we want to make sure what we're doing is giving credible sources and credible things as when we bring these things out. So I'm gonna show you this piece of information, and as always, these what's the word I'm looking for? You can also get the source if you want. So right here, King John II in 1492 expelled all the Jews. That's what's important, that these are Jews. He expelled all the Jews. Is a historical report, also with the geneticists that know these reports. It says expelled all the Jews to the island of Sao Tome, which had been discovered in 1471. Now, what's important is it was a private island. That means no one else was there. They can't say that it was a bunch of natives there or anything like that. And to other Portuguese settlements to the continent of Africa. So what's important is that they sent Jews to Africa and to Sao Tome. And watch it says right here. And from these banished Jews, the Black Portuguese, as they are called, and the Jews of Lengado, who are despised even by the very Negroes and are descendant of the Negroes. Now, I'm going to show you now. That's why they say they have African descent and stuff like that.
Right.
But if we look at the, let me actually go over. I'm going to show you now here is the finds.
And also remember, before we even touch on that, remember that they still, even though we've proven that the E haplogroup is of the Levant origin, they still call it African.
And that's something, because that's one of those things they don't want you to know that. They want to keep on saying African and African, calling everyone African. That's what's important to know, that they want to just keep calling everyone from Africa. But that's some interesting history too about Africa. So it just talks about Sao Tome and the people that went there. It said 2,000 children were there. Now, what's important here too is this statement. The fact that they know for a fact that they called them new Christians and that they was on an island and they couldn't leave that island. That's what's important, that they actually started to contribute to the population. That's what makes it very important, is that these new Christians, they actually started to contribute to the population and became one with the population. As you can see right here, this is actually from the genetic report. It says, and sent right here, it says, so they could be away from the Jewish faith, grew up with a Christian education, and watch what it says here. They did contributed. Now this is where it's important, because this is how we got to know, we got to find them there, because they're going to be of the population. They contributed to the population of the new territory, right? That's one of the aims that they wanted to do, for them to all to be one. That was one of the aims of the Portuguese king. Now I'm gonna show you now real fast. Like he said, we don't find any J. We don't find J there. So how can the Ashkenaz be the people if we know that Jews 100% went there and actually became one with the population? Here is the real genetic find. We find E1B1A, and that's M2, and then the break of it is actually M191, M191. And I also, what I did, I noted that was actually going to be, I'll show you what that branch is on a full tree, what exact branch that is, because I also noted what branch it was, getting right to the exact pinpoint of it.
So like the brother about to show you, these Sephardic Jews that we've been telling you all this history about, who was exiled to the island of Sao Tome, they have the same exact DNA makeup as the so-called Negro West and South Africans.
That's right. And you see right here, this is what's found in the land of Sao Tome y Principe. You can see right here, E1B1A7. That's the one that's found right there. That's actually see that M191? M191. These are actually the ones we see. Either these two, you see either this one or this one. I'm not going to, I believe that this is probably Ephraim and this is probably Judah. Most likely this is Judah, because remember, those were Jews that were taken there. This is actually the branch of Judah, and this seems like a branch of Ephraim. This is actually these two, E1B1A7 or E1B1A8. These are the two that you mainly see in Africa, which is also talked about in the Bantu expansion. But let me go over here and let me show you again on another, because I actually have two reports of those genetic studies. Here's another one that we was talking about. So you see right here, we just talked about how we found them there. So remember I said M191. So right there, M191. So you can see right there, that's that one right there. And then, it just tells us that that's the haplogroup of the Jewish descendants from Sao Tome, right? 260. You see that? No J, but they know that the R, they can't use the R because the R is actually going to be that lineage that's found in the Portuguese. So 246 to that group of Jews that contributed to the population. So M2 is that what they found there. That's why you see to be exact, it was the most frequent haplogroup was that's just E1B1A, and that's going to be 84.2%. And obviously, they're actually pure. It just means like out of if you had 100 people, 84 of them would be E1B1A, pretty much.
Right.
And then obviously the second common group is your R1B, which is only 8%. And it just lets us know that, that's because of, as it says right there, typical haplogroup from Western Europe, most likely carried by Portuguese settlers, suggesting their genetic contribution to this population. That's actually important to understand that we don't find, as they say it word for word. That's why the brother was talking about that right here. Right, they talk about how they didn't find right here. They say they was missing J and T. That's actually against them. That's not good that they're missing J and T there, because we know for a fact that the Jews went there and contributed to the population. That means we'll find the J and T if they was Jews. So that's a done deal right there. Just to let you know that finding this lineage in the private island of Sao Tome that is not recorded of them bringing slaves there is over. Just so you understand that they didn't record that. They recorded that was a private island of these groups that basically was living life like normal people. That was trying to live life like normal people and was trying to be. It was like an education center. It was like a center where they was doing education and stuff like that. The places where you had the centers for the slavery were in certain places, like especially in Brazil and what they call the New Indies, which is actually going to be places like Jamaica and stuff like that, and also places in America, of course. In Sao Tome, Principe, that was a private island. That was like a place that they, basically was living life in.
Right. And even if you want to get into anthropological evidence on this, I don't have it pulled up, but even the skulls they found of the Sephardic Jews in Spain were dolichocephalic, right? The same skull as so-called sub-Saharan Africans.
That's absolutely right, because if we actually look at the skulls, I actually I was doing some research on that. Now, it's important to know, yes, you can find different types of skulls and different types of people, but your predominant skull is what's going to be the one that you want to look at, whatever is the dominant one in the population, which in the Sephardic skulls, because they found skulls of the people, they found actual, that's also what I didn't show on there, to also have the genetic information with the finds that was found in the land of pretty much, the how you say Spain, right? We also have in Spain the skulls of the people and whatnot. We have the skulls of them, and they know for a fact that the skulls of them are dolichocephatic, that those were actually the Jews in that area. I also have a quote. I have a very interesting quote I want to read about these skulls. This is how we know is also important, because there's a conversation between some two wise individuals when they're talking about these skulls and the finds about the skulls and everything. I'm just going to read that real fast over here. Okay, so here's the skulls. They're just talking about the shape, dolichocephatic versus, the different types and stuff. I'm going to read you this quote. This is what they were doing when they were studying the Jewish skulls. And I'll show you that this is actually a real little quote here. I'll just open it real fast just to show you. So right here, I'll just show you this. Here's the quote. It's going to be from here, just John M. Efron and whatnot, and just talks about what's going on, human biology and whatnot. You got some names here, just to show you that. I'm going to read this from University of California. I'm going to read what they talk about here. I'm going to read what they say on this thing. Just click this, and I'm going to show you this little thing that I thought was very interesting. So once it pops up, I'm going to talk about what they thought was very interesting. Okay, so they just talk about the skull and everything. I'm going to jump right down here. Jacob, watch what it says here. Jacob's characterization, let me zoom in a little more. Jacob's characterization of Jewish skull shape was widely supported by, I don't know how you say it. How you say that?
Craniometrics.
Oh yeah, craniometrics. That's going to be your studying of the skull shape and stuff. It says, nevertheless, for those like Jacobs who subscribe to a theory of Jewish racial purity, because that's what one of the biggest things that the Jews say, that they are the pure Jews. They are the Jews that descended, the ones that came from Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, right? So that's why they was looking at these things. The present day, now they talking about a different skull shape. That's why I was just showing you on that other one right here. This is a different skull shape. This is what they found in the Jews. This is a different skull shape. So he's going to be talking about that one. I'm just going to call it skull B because I forgot you said Bronchian. I'm not going to try this. How you pronounce that? I don't know how to pronounce that.
Brachycephalicism, something like that.
Something like that. Yeah, exactly. And this is, I'll just call it skull B. So that's skull D, skull B, and there's a different type of skull. There's another skull that we're not talking about right now. So right here is going to be your B. It's going to be right here. It's going to say, of the Jews required explanation. Now watch what they say here. One more time. Nevertheless, for those like Jacobs who subscribe to a theory of Jewish racial purity, the present day, right? Because this is actually what the Ashkenazi have. They have type B, not doeicosaphatic, like the one they find in Sao Tome y Principe, or the one they find in Spain. The present day type B skull of the Jews require explanation. Why? For if the modern Jews were directly descended from the ancient Hebrews and they were Shemites, why then did the modern Jews not display the same doeicosaphatic long-headed characteristics as modern day Shemites, such as Arabs or Sephardic Jews? See what he just said there? It's what they're talking about is actually talking about the, actually have a picture just to get an example. See these different types of skulls. So doeicosaphatic is this type. There's another one, which is type M. I just say DMB. And this one right here is going to be the one that they say is actually what you see in the modern Jews. We can also get an idea right here. Ashkenazi are 92% B, right? Versus who they say is Sephardic, only 8% M. This is actually, they're not, even the ones who they call Sephardic is actually a different one. They're not even doeicosaphatic. They're not even doeicosaphatic. They're B and they're the M1, which is right here. They're this M1 and they're this B1, but they're not doeicosaphatic. And that's what the people who were studying it couldn't believe it. They couldn't believe it when they were seeing it, because they were seeing the skulls. You can't change genetics. You can't change skull shape. That's one of those things that they know for a fact. So it's very interesting with those things and whatnot. So they try to make some excuses on how is that possible? How can this happen? You know. So I just wanted to show you that was something they was panic about with those things, with that doeicosaphatic, which you was just talking about.
When we speaking about the Sephardics, we not talking about the European Ashkenazi Sephardics that they show you today. We talking about the Yaya Ben Negroes. We talking about the Black Barbanels. We talking about the real royal Negro Jews of Spain and Portugal that displayed this same DNA as us and the same skull shape as us.
I got a quote from Nature that also tells you, this is from Nature, from where you get the genetic studies. It says, Jewish skulls are extremely rare in museums. Indeed, there do not appear to be any data whatsoever for the ancient Hebrews. And then it says the cranial index of 5 skulls of the 2nd century found in Rome, it says varies from, just tells you the size and everything, of 12 skulls found in this area. They talk about these skulls are actually going to be your actual ones from the Hebrews. And watch what it says here. In a cemetery dating from the 13th and 14th century, because remember 13th, 14th century, 2 were doeicosaphatic, and then it talks about the remainder was these ones, and it talks about basically a total average of 87%. It says the same. Now watch what it says here. This is what is going to get interesting, because these are just talking about some of the skulls that were found in the land, but now it's going to tell you who exactly was the Jews, the Sephardic Jews. The same variable, what was that? Variant, something. Yes, pretty much
variability.
Variability occurs in other finds. Now watch what it says here. But the skulls of most of the Sephardim or Spanish and Portuguese Jews are doeicosaphatic. So you see that one more time. But the skulls of most of the Sephardim or Spanish and Portuguese Jews, of the ones of the ancient in the 14th and 9th century, I mean 14th and the 15th century, are doeicosaphatic. So
there you go. There you have it. So like this source said, like we were basically bringing mention to, like the brother pointed out as well, these people that got expelled, these Jews that got sent to Sao Tome were 86% E1B1A, and they had zero traces of the Jewish haplogroups J and T. So the question is, why were these haplogroups not found? Why were J and T not found? To do
Exactly.
that, or to find out that, we're going to go to ancient DNA from Chaldaic Israel reveals the role of population mixture in cultural transformation. And within this, we see that it says that this finding contradicts, or this finding contrasts with both earlier Neolithic and Epilithic Levantine populations. All right. So the Levantine populations, which were dominated by haplogroup E, and later Bronze Age individuals, all who belong to haplogroup J. So this, as well as this, not only lines up with our oral tradition, this also lines up with history, because we see that the Natufians were the earliest people of the Levant, and they had haplogroup E, right? And this source just let us know that the Levant was dominated by haplogroup E.
That's
But
right.
later on, haplogroup J came throughout the Bronze Age, and we know that we had the Ottoman Turks invasion, we had different European evasions
In fact,
into the Levant, into the Middle East.
go ahead, go ahead.
No, you good. Go ahead.
To get more detail, what they're actually talking about is ancient genetics, and what they're pinpoint talking about is actually when J actually invaded the land as the Sea Peoples and took over the Levant, which is also found genetically. The J haplogroup, when it came down from the Sea Peoples and it settled in the land, it was mixed with other groups, and we also see the same groups, and we also seen the same. They word for word say that they also found in them the same diseases, the same, because what's also important that the Ashkenazi, they have a lot of diseases. They have more mutations than most people, and that's actually just a true fact. And they also found the same. I got a quote where they say themselves that they find the exact same diseases and in the same groupings and all those things. So the same, pretty much the same things, pretty much. Really interesting, because it has that saying there about how they have, the same things previous. And
In
it's pretty
fact,
much, yeah.
go ahead.
It pretty much, it reports right here. I'll just read it. Results support population continuity in the region, and suggested that several present day genetic disorders might stem go down a little bit, might stem from risks. What's that? Allergies that were already.
Yeah.
I said
Alleles.
allergies that were already present in the Bronze Age population. So that's important to understand, because if you already was doing, I had a long thing that I was talking about. Let me open this. I didn't think I was going to open this up, but one of my first ever notes that I ever when I start realizing something wasn't right, it all started with the diseases that they had. I was like, why do they have so many diseases? It's very interesting. So I wanted to look into that and just see, because I had I knew an Ashkenazi. I had an Ashkenazi. We was actually cool at first, but then he didn't like me because I started talking about Christ. So he stopped talking to me with that. But he told me a lot of stuff. He actually told me how they came from Russia. He told me about something. That's where I got all the understandings from. He told me that they came from Russia, and that they was actually, most of them never even been to Israel. A lot of them haven't even been to Israel before, and even their ancestors. They say a lot of their ancestors never been to Israel. They actually say, yeah.
Even that DNA cluster map you showed us, or that pie graph you showed us of their DNA being mixed with those different European tribes, shows that they have no even connection to the Middle East.
Yeah, exactly. It's one of those things where, like, when you look at the whole picture of it, it just completely shows you that the world we live in it's trying to really hide this, but it can't be hidden. It just can't be hidden at all. It can't be hidden. Let me see if I can find that, because it's a really interesting quote. But you can easily find it just by typing down Ashkenazi you know, the diseases and stuff like that. You could find information on that. It's just letting us know the same diseases that they had then, they have now, pretty much. But I had a place that I had pretty much a talk of those dysfunctions and stuff. But that's one of those things, you know, go in a little more detail. It gives you the answer right then and there. That's what's found them. That's what's found in them. That's what's found in them. But I'll see if I can even okay, here it is. That's why I like Evernote, because you can find stuff like this. Right here, this just talks about the, you know, like I was saying about their genetic dysfunctions and stuff like that. It's found there in those age and whatnot. This one probably talks a little bit about the DNA disease. Let me see if I can find it on directly on this thing right here. And it's not hard to find yourself, but just to show that right here. Author of a new study come from nearly 24 research groups in New York, and talks about that and whatnot. I'm gonna go down a little bit where it says right here, their gene pool is closed. It says, I'm actually read this part right here. Let me actually move this. That makes it easier to identify genes linked to specific diseases, like, you know, Parkinson's disease, which is mainly that's found in them and whatnot. So it talks about all these diseases that they had before. That's the reason why this is actually a big deal, because they have the most mutations. That's what makes it very interesting, because they have some of the most mutations and they get some of the most diseases. And that's what's interesting, that it was all the way back in that group back then. It was all the way back in that group back then. That's why I said the J group took over, because they was actually the ones that came with Scythian. That's what I was showing earlier when I was showing the Scythian. I was showing that Scythian, you know, they do have that J in Scythian, where you can see right here, that J right here, those J groups that came down there. That's where they came from. That's how they got into Levant, because they came from the Sea Peoples and they settled in Scythian in the time where the Sea Peoples came down.
God. And even another question would be to the fact is, are those diseases native to the Levant? Are they shown in ancient Levantine populations?
So they actually, what's interesting is the Sea Peoples, the way they got to the Levant, they actually know for a fact that they came from the north. They know for a fact that they were a people from the north. They actually word for word put it down, that they came from the north. They had the diseases with them as they, like, that's just something that they just that
brought it with them, like the you know, like the colonialists did to the natives.
Yeah, pretty much yeah. And what this would actually be a more of a genetic dysfunction.
Okay.
Here's pretty much breaking it down. I'm gonna just quickly break it down. So pretty much what the story is, it looks complex, but people from the Zagros Mountain, the Caucasus Mountain, came to the area and merged what they call Southern Levant. These are actually going to be your Canaanites A and B lineages. They actually merged with the females of the Levant. And when they came and merged with the females of the Levant, they actually would become one people. And at the end of the day, after a long period of time, because you can see right here, the Neolithic, the Chalcolithic, and all that stuff like that right now, you know, all those ages and stuff. Notice that group, when they merged together, they actually became what you see as your European, and they call also they're mixed with the, you know, they say African, because the Canaanite lineage that mixed with them also there. So they actually had that group there. Now also not just Canaanite, but they consider it too, because that E1B1B lineage that end up merging in that group, and when they later was called because at this time they didn't have that E1B1B with them, but that E1B1B came a little later in the time when they came. So this is one of those things that's really interesting when you look at the nitty gritty of it. The details of it just pretty much shows us. Here's just a summary right here. It says these individuals who share the Canaanite, basically the female culture, can be modeled as descending from two sources. It says earlier local Neolithic populations and populations related to the Chalcolithic Zagros, or the Bronze Age Caucasus Mountain. So it tells you that they came from the Zagros is you know, past Iran. That's like way over there in the distance. So that's actually their origin. That's where they came. That's the Sea Peoples. Now there's different ones that came more towards It's also important to know they also came from areas of the Greek. If you look up Neolithic Greek, that's what you're going to see, J there. J is in Neolithic Greece, Neolithic Greece. That's where you're going to find J, and predominantly in that land. And that's where they came from. They came from all over. And that's what Ramses talked about. They made a confederacy, and they all came together. And that's what we see in that land. We see a mixing of those groupings in that land. That's why I just ended it right here. It says, we find that Levant-related modern populations typically have substantial ancestry coming from populations related to the Chalcolithic, Zagros, and the Bronze Age Southern Levant. Now, the reason Levant, because, A and B is right there, right? And the Canaanites, they're Hamites. They're right in that area. And that's what they found. That's why they say Africans also mixed in with the who they say Ashkenazi. So that's actually who they are. They actually the people who came down, who they call the Sea Peoples, and settled in the Levant. Very interesting on seeing those things. So and obviously that's because they have multiple Y chromosomes. They can find those in different areas in Sidon and whatnot. So that's one of those things that's fairly interesting to see.
Right. So especially what the brother was just bringing out on the J haplogroup, right? So like this source said, the dominant haplogroup in the Levant indeed was the haplogroup E before the invasion of haplogroup J. Now that is important because earlier, I'm gonna go back to the source right quick, but earlier when I brought out this source, while here speaking on the Natufians who carried haplogroup E, remember it said that they showed that the Natufians spoke Afro-Asiatic languages, all right, before it branched off into its daughter languages. It goes on to say that linguistics were the first to show that the Indo-Europeans inhabited some of the territory near the east, later known as Anatolia, some 8 millennia ago, and that they were strongly influenced by both Semites, all right, the Natufians, and descendants of the above-mentioned Afro-Asian and Huri Caucasians. It says Indo-Europeans borrowed from many cultural words, designation, and various domesticated animals and plants, tools, religious terms, and so on. So again, we see that these Indo-Europeans that came down to the Levant and borrowed from them many cultural words, designations, domesticated animals, plants, tools, and religious terms, and so on, were indeed these people carrying the J marker.
Yep, that will tell you. There it is. From the Bronze Age. Yep.
Fact.
It came down.
These people, like he was just bringing out from the Caucasus or from the north, basically. Well, we're about to get into it, and we're going to find that out in Origin and the Diffusion of Human Y Chromosomes, haplogroup J1, M267. All right. I'm not going to list out the full names, but it says, interestingly, the 13,000-year-old hunter-gatherers from the South Caucasus belongs to haplogroup J, all right? Haplogroup J. The J branch is found overwhelmingly among ancient and modern populations from the Caucasus, the Armenian highland, Iran, and Anatolia, all right? The branch constitutes the branch constitutes the aforementioned peak of haplogroup J frequency in the Northern Caucasus, all right? So this haplogroup originated in the Northern Caucasus before it came down to the Levant, as mentioned in the source before.
That's right. And what's also interesting about that, if I could show my screen, I can actually show that in great detail of that movement real fast. And it won't even take me not even like a minute.
Come on.
So pretty much if you look at the ancient lands, we know for a fact that when you think about how it said Anatolia, that's just going to be where modern day Turkey is. And we can find them, like I said, the J lineage is up here, coming from these areas, coming down, even from Armenia. And all these locations, all these names, they find those ancient genetics. Also, I was trying to find there's one with the E also up here, but I found one with the basically showing you the J. I'm going to zoom out just to show you which location I'm at real fast. So you see this right here. This is in ancient times. And you can see there's J lineages all the way past the Caucasus Mountain. And this is actually what's important is that this area, if you look at a map with Herodotus, like Herodotus map design, how he designs the map, you know for a fact that that area is actually known basically throughout time that was owned by the Scythians. This area right here, you actually had Scythians that owned these areas and around these areas. That's important to know that there was different. When I say Scythians, it's just like, your known Japhetic lines that were up there. And what's interesting is when we look at that grouping, we can see them in these areas. We can see them in these areas. I'm just going to zoom just to show you right here. And what's important too is, when you think about J right here, you can see that J2. Sometimes you can see J1 and J2. You see J2 up here and these time frames. So just to show you what time frame we're actually showing here, there's actually going to be this time frame right here, Enolithic. It also, shows you a little bit about those time frames and stuff. So you can see them up there. That's one of those things that is without a doubt. We can find ancient genetics of them in these areas and over here, all the way over in these areas. I want to do a have that on here. So obviously, you can look through these maps. They have different layouts, and that's how we find their ancient genetics. We know for a fact they're up here. That's that note is true. It's 100% true. You can look it up yourself and see that these things are true. What it's saying there. So I just wanted to say that. Because following those things is 100%. It's 100% that the J lineage can't be native to the land, because ancient fossils are found of them in different places, and not just the word. What also is important is not just going to be regular fossils that's found. Now I'm going to show you something. If we type down what is the high priest, they call it the CMH haplogroup.
Right, the Kohen.
They call it the Kohen haplogroup. And what they say that it is, they actually say that it's JM267. And what's interesting about that, he was just reading about J267. And what's interesting about J267, it has a direct subclad, which is basically 58 is basically 58. And let's see if it's actually on here just to show you that, because I'm going to show you now real fast another thing just to confirm that 58, it says right there, it talks about it's also in the Zagros Mountain and everything, even there and everything. I don't know why it wouldn't slide up real fast, but let me show you one more thing real fast on here. On this one, I'm just going to go over to the J, and I want to show you something. So remember how you was just looking at that lineage? That's actually going to be P58. Now, P58, they try to make it all complex, but that's just that one. That's just that one that you just read. That's that same one that you just read. Because I had made a whole note on this pretty much. When it comes to their family tree, I know their family tree extremely well. I know their family tree very well because that's mainly what I was studying. But right here, just to show you, this is going to be that lineage M267. That's that P58 and whatnot. I don't know if I have that next to each other. Sometimes I like to have those abbreviations together, because in case somebody is trying to look into it and study it, you can still, here's an idea of it. I guess this is a good way to break it down. So from JM304 comes J1 M267. That's that one he was talking about. That leads down to the one they say supposedly is pinpoint the high priest. They say no, it's not just J1 M267. It's actually JP58, which comes from M267. And what's also interesting is this quote. I'm gonna read you this quote right here. It says, in addition, there's actually two males that they know is 100% has to be the seed peoples of Sidon, because they're found in the center of it. Dead in the center of it, and they have this lineage. They say the two Sidon BA males carry the Y chromosome haplogroups JP58. That's that lineage that they say is the high priest line. Yeah, it's found in the area of and they also say that it came from the Zagros Mountains and all that. So they found it in Sidon.
So like the brother just said, just confirming that DNA is not native to the Levant whatsoever, right? Like he said, it migrated down from the Caucasus. Just a refresher, the haplogroup E is the native haplogroup to the Levant, and it was the most dominant haplogroup in the Levant until the invasion of the haplogroup J from the Caucasus, right? From the north, from Europe. But continuing on, we're about to read from this book right quick, Abraham's Children, Race, Identity, and the DNA of the Chosen People. All right, we're going to notice something right quick. We see E3A, which is E1B1A, right? It's an African lineage, as they call it, most likely dispersed from the north, most likely dispersed south from northern Africa within the last 3,000 years with the Bantu agriculture expansion, the most common lineage among African Americans. All right, so the most common lineage among African Americans can be traced back to the Levant.
There it is.
Continuing on, even E3B, right? They say this is from the Middle East, but how can E3B be from the Middle East and not E3A? But it says before spreading it to the Mediterranean during the Pleistocene Neolithic expansion found in many Arab populations in areas around the Mediterranean in East and North Africa, particularly among the Berbers and in Southeastern Europe. So if you was to look at E1B1B today and E1B, if you was to look at E1B1B today and E1B1A today, you would see that they are in both North and Sub-Saharan Africa, right? Amongst the Berbers and your so-called Sub-Saharan African population. But also notice what it says about this J haplogroup, all right? Arose 10,000 to 15,000 years ago in the Fertile Crescent. It includes Jews, Arabs, Armenians, and Kurds, all right? Found in its highest frequencies in Iran and Iraq from where it most likely originated, all right? So it most likely originated in this area, which we already brought out.
Mm-hmm.
It goes on to say, while the majority of haplogroup J is not Jewish, the
That's
majority of Jewish men fall into J. So how are they Jewish if
that's
J
right.
not Jewish?
There it is. And what's interesting about it too is that J is predominantly Turkish. That means like the Turkish, like when you think about the Turkish, that's like a lot of the mixing with the barbarians, right? Alans and stuff like that.
Mhm.
Turks, the Seljuk Turks that came in and took the Arabs. That's also important too. That's why the mystery of who's the Arabs too. A lot of the mystery came in with the Arabs because the Seljuk Turks that actually had the major group of J, that Seljuk Turks came down and took the Middle East. That's the when you think about the Ottoman Empire, that was going to be the Turks.
Right. So like the brother just brought up that J haplogroup, they love to say that that is the Cohen model, right, of the ancient Israelites or per se Aaron. Yet we can trace this back to northern Europe or to Turkey or Iran. So the thing is, or the question would be, when in time did Aaron live in that location or the Levites?
Mm-hmm.
Continuing on, and we're about to get ready to wrap it up with these slides as it goes, but it goes on to say the CMH is found in the J haplogroup, one of the streamlined groupings of 18 major lineages, which geneticists letter A through R, subgroups or clades of two haplogroups, E and J, are disproportionately common in Ashkenazi Jews and are co-equally described as Semitic or Jewish. Let me start right there.
There
Remember,
you go.
let me start. Yeah, right, exactly. Let me start right there. Remember, we are E1B1A. The Ashkenazis, they have 20 to 30% E1B1B.
And
So,
notice it also says they have right there 18 major lineages. That's important because they wanted to see if it was 12, but they got 18. The E lineage has 12, but the J lineage has 18.
facts. And notice that they said this E haplogroup once more. It says they are co-equally described as Semitic or Jewish. So again, how can the E branch they have be Semitic or Jewish and not the E branch we have at 80, 90%, 95%, 100%? How can that not be Semitic in origin or Jewish in origin?
It's pure facts.
So when we doing these things, we always have to chew the meat, spit out the bone, and realize what they saying in the language. They're basically admitting that this E haplogroup is Semitic or Jewish. Continuing on, though because of their ancient origins, they show up in in other populations. It is believed that the man originated. Excuse me. It is believed that the man who originated the J lineage lived in the northern part of the Fertile Crescent thousands of years before some of his descendants migrated to the Middle East. 7,500 years ago. So again, how can J be Jewish if they migrated to the Middle East? So they knocked themselves on the head once more. So we can scratch that J out and we can just say that E is described as Semitic or Jewish
There it
because
is.
it was there first. So boom.
That's right.
And that's all I got, brother. But if you want to, you can continue to dig or continue to go in, show some more.
Yeah, if you can show me something, I would like to show you something real fast when considering the Natufian DNA. The reason why I want to show you this is because when you think about the Natufian DNA, they say that is a long time ago, but if you look at everyone's DNA, in fact, they word for word tell you that the E lineage, as well as all other lineages, are popped up at about the same time. That they all usually popped up about the same time.
Yeah, and
But
I
the only
should have
one,
mentioned that in the beginning, like these numbers that they be 65,000 years ago, all that's not true.
exactly. Because look at that. They try to say the J 7,000 and 12,000 and these things. You gotta always remember when they're dating these things, they have a concept in their mind. A lot of times they have a concept, and you got to also know about how they're dating these things. A lot of them, if you look at the mutation rate, they know the mutation rate doesn't match with how old they are. But that's another subject. Just know that those years, just know that it's ancient times to our time. That's what it means. It's ancient times to our time. And looking at the more older ones, those are the ones we find in the Levant. If you can show my screen real fast, I want to show something, and I want to talk about this thing real fast of the Natufian. Now, if you look up the Natufian, you can just type it down, and you'll find a map like this. Now, the question is, if the Natufian, as you can actually see, I actually did a video on the Natufian, their homeland was here, but sometimes you'll see their homeland, you see them out like this. Why? Because the Natufian also has predominantly E1B1B. E1B1A is a small portion that's found here. But E1B1B actually spreads all out like this, spreads all to here, to here, here, even found, remember I said they were found over here? I couldn't find that one. I was looking for it on this thing. But as you can see right here, just if you all the things that I've shown, I'm an honest man. They are over here, the E lineage. They stretch all the way over here. And what's also important to know, you see how dark this is right here in
Mm.
Arabia? They mainly was in Arabia. Now, how did they get into Africa? This is early on. How did they get into Africa? You would think, they must be African. They got to Africa. But if you follow the history trail, you probably already know about the saying with Flavius Josephus. If someone is not familiar with it, make sure you know this part of history. Everyone accepts Flavius Josephus as a historian. Any historian accepts Flavius Josephus. All you do is show them this if you ever have something like that problem. Because it's talked about by multiple different people, what's going on and stuff like that. Pretty much, long story short, Flavius Josephus writes that the sons of Abraham, which are from Keturah, which is also important to know the story of Gibeon, or Gideon, that pretty much talks about, and the book of Judges 6 and 7 and 8 basically talks about what happened with the Midianites. Those are going to be the sons of Keturah. It's also important to know that they moved into the lands that are actually called Africa. Just to
Mm.
show, yeah, just to show a little bit of that real fast right here. You can see right here, it just talks about Abraham, and you can find it in Flavius Josephus, complete, or the new complete works of Flavius Josephus, book 1, chapter 15. And pretty much it just has that where it says Abraham, with Keturah brought forth sons. Long story short, right here it says Abraham basically settled them in colonies, and says they took possession of this place called, how you say that, Togole Data, or how you say, I can never
Yeah,
pronounce that, but
Troglodytes.
go try. There it is. He said it. So right there, that word actually means a place in Syria, because I also double checked to see some sources on it and everything to see if that was connected to Syria. And it is. It's right above Syria. So basically, Abraham told them to go to Syria, and he told them to go to the areas of Arabia. That's also important too. So right here, he says they went in the country of Arabia the Happy, as far as it reaches of the Dead Sea. Now, if you notice, the Dead Sea is this right here. The Dead Sea reaches all the way over
Red
here.
Sea.
The Red Sea right there, and
Yeah,
the
yeah.
Dead Sea right there. So they go all the way down there. And if you see right here, they went to Arabia. They settled in Arabia right there. The Red Sea. And they actually settled in that area. Going back over here. Also notice, so all the way to the Red Sea, just to make it clear, because the Dead Sea is a different location, but the Red Sea is right here. on the Red Sea, all the way up to the ends. So you see how it's darker right here. So there's going to be a more higher percentage right here. Now, also, how did they get into here? How did they get down into Africa? He also records that right here. He says, as far as it reached to the Red Sea, it is told about that this Orphrene, that he made war against Libya and took it, and his grandchildren, when they inhabited it, called it from his name Africa. From a first century historian, and it is verified by other historians and other quotes in different places and stuff like that. It's really interesting to know, because if we look in Africa, you know, the sons of Abraham, these are the Natufian. This is still early on. This is really early. They also took this part down here, and that's also important to know too, that we got to find out where these ones were and who were they. And this is actually going to be your E1B1B. And if you look on modern maps, right, modern maps of genetics, and type down E1B1B and E1B1A, you get a clear, clean cut of separation of these groups right here. You can see these ones. This is E1B1B up here, but your E1B1A got down here, and you got to also follow the history on how they got down here. That was all because of the exiles and stuff like that. What happened with Sennacherib when they got sent down there is recorded, that the Jews were on the other side of Euphrates. When Flavius Josephus was in Rome, he said they were down there in Africa pretty much, just to make it short.
And leave that map up for me real quick.
Go ahead, say it again.
Leave that map to the left. Is that an E1B1A map?
Yeah, so this right here, this is actually going to be a map of E1B1A right here, where you see majority of your E1B1A, and actually you see your E1B1B right here. This will be a majority of E1B1B. You also see them up here in the in ancient maps. You can see them up here too.
So let me just say something to verify, you feel me, that the Israelites are indeed E1B1A, as we see. According to the scriptures, Zephaniah 3:10, beyond the rivers of Ethiopia, my daughters shall be dispersed, right? As well as when we go to the Talmud and we look at the letter to the lost 10 tribes of Israel, we see that they were actually said to be beyond the rivers of Nubia once again. We go to 9th century historian Eldad the Danite. He says the same thing. The 10 tribes were beyond the rivers of Ethiopia. So boom.
And remember, you got to look at ancient maps when you're thinking about Ethiopia, because it's also interesting to note that on ancient maps, when you consider Ethiopia is actually going to be, I'm going to show you on an ancient map real fast, which is kind of interesting seeing it like that. Because now as you say that, I just thought about that Ethiopia was everything underneath the upper area of Libya. Because remember, Libya was given to the sons of Africa, the sons of Arabia, right? Mm-hmm. It was given to them, and they had Arabia, and then they moved, as it said by the first century historian, they moved into Libya, which all of this was Libya. Upper Africa was Libya, and everything underneath it was Ethiopia. And remember, there's a quote that says the Jews seem like they have an Ethiopian origin. So it's very interesting to see that.
That's facts.
I think I have another one right here, a little map, because that was recorded by Tacitus, a historian, a Greek historian, that pretty much when he noted the Jews, he basically noted that they were like a darker skinned people. He related them to darker skinned people twice in one quote. So it's very interesting to see that. Very interesting to see that. So right here, it said they came from Ethiopia. It said they have an Ethiopian origin, like blackface origin, they said that the Jews have. So very interesting to see that with those quotes. Very interesting to see those things. So first century historians.
And again, the main point of this video indeed was to show you that the E1B1A branch left the Levant, settled in sub-Saharan Africa, the same place where our ancestors. You get what I'm saying? It just matches up all the way with our oral traditions. We show how the DNA is in the same places our ancestors ended up at today.
That's right. And look, they're scattered in all nations. That's also important to know too. They're in all nations. They're in Saudi Arabia, Mali, Congo, of course, America, right? Spain. You find our people everywhere. The people they're everywhere. Jamaica, right? They're Lebanon. They're everywhere. Australia, right? They're in all these places. They're Egypt. They're sent all around the world. This is just a list of people who are willing to do genetic tests. Peru, so you can see that Germany, all over the world, these individuals were sent out everywhere. So you can see that's a fulfillment to the scripture where it says they'll be scattered in all nations. They shall fall by the edge of the sword and shall be scattered into all nations. So it's very interesting to see those things. Some are even also known as being Native Americans. So you can see one of
Right,
the
right.
individuals. Yeah.
Those are the only Israelites I say are Native Americans. Those with the E haplogroup, man.
Yeah, that's gonna be the real. That's gonna be the real Israelites. That's right. E1B1A is
Right.
what we find.
So let me show this real quick.
Go ahead.
Let's see. I wanted to talk about this as well. That Japanese finding. Can you see it?
Let me see. Oh yeah, yeah, there it is. Let's see
Con.
what's that. Let's see what's going here.
So DNA shows Japanese and Jewish peoples are relatives. All right, like the brother pointed out earlier. DE, I mean, it was a branch originally known as DE, right, in the Middle East. D branched off and went into Asia and Japan, right? And E stayed in the Middle East and branched off into Africa, basically. We see it says 40% of Japanese have connection with Jews, the Jews that the world called. All right, Y chromosome DNA haplogroup DE in the Middle East is split off into the Japanese and your Chang and other lost tribes, as they say. And we see that E went into the Ashkenazim, the Sephardims, the Levites of Samaria, and so forth, so on. So it says haplogroup E is very, very characteristic in Jews. 20 to 30% of both Ashkenazis and Sephardim have haplogroup E. So again, what's so important about this haplogroup E? It goes on to say, let's see where the meat at. We're going to go to the meat. But notice it says, in fact, 88% of Ashkenazi Jews and Sephardim DNA are common. So they come from the same root stock. And that's what we was trying to tell you all earlier, that the Sephardic Jews today aren't the ones that came out of the Inquisition.
That's right.
So it says 20 to 30% haplogroup E, all right? 30% haplogroup J, 20% haplogroup R. This is what's found in most of these Jews. But DNA of the ancient native Israelites, it said it seems the DNA of the native Israelites would have been DE or E. All right. It seems that the native DNA was haplogroup DE or E. So again, we're not tripping when we say the E haplogroup is Semitic. Okay.
Yep.
It goes on to say, furthermore, every Jewish group in the world has haplogroup E prominently, all right, at a website of DNA test provider. The family tree DNA is written about specific type E1B1B, which belongs to the E haplogroup, all right? Remember, we don't have E1B1B. We have E1B1A.
Yep.
It says E1B1B is found in all Jewish populations, from Ashkenazi, Sephardic, Kurdish, Yemen, Samaritan, and even the Djerba Jewish group. So notice how they clinging on to this E haplogroup, but they only have it at 20 to 30%. So it's not like they actually are the people. But it goes on to say, thus haplogroup E is found in all Jewish populations predominantly. All right, I just read that. But notice, this is where it gets deep. It says the Pathans of Afghanistan and Pakistan, who are said to be descendants of the lost tribes of Israel, have haplogroup E remarkably. Use Bikastan Jews, who are said also to be of the lost tribes of Israel, have haplogroup E at a rate of 28%. So notice they have these haplogroups at a low percentage. And even at that point, it's not even E1B1A.
That's right.
So the Falashas of Ethiopia, the Falashas Ethiopian Jews, they have haplogroup E at 50%, right? They are E1B1A. And this is where it just goes sideways. It said the Igbo Jews in Nigeria have haplogroup E at 90%. Now the thing is, the Igbos are E1B1A.
That's right.
So they seems like they just admitted that indeed the DNA, or the most pure DNA of the Israelites, was indeed E1B1A. Because why would they throw in the Igbo Jews of Nigeria who's a totally different or who's the totally opposite haplogroup of them, and they are at a way higher percentage.
I love that last thing they say. They say haplogroup E is thus found among those who are said to be from the lost tribes of Israel. What
So
the?
there we have it.
There it is. Oh, I wanted to show. I wanted to read something real fast, just to give a more detailed understanding on this E1B1B. They're not just E1B1B, but they're a special subclad, and they're always going to be this special subclad. And I'm gonna tell you real fast. We know this what it is. M35 is always going to be M35. M35 is going to be from the line of the E1B1B, M35. M35, also known as E3B1E, which is in Ashkenaz, Turks, also in Hitler, and other mixes, is a much later sub branch of M215. Now, M215 is going to be your real Arabs. M215, that's going to be a sub branch that's going to be there for a long time. But your I'm going to talk about this one right here. It says, as we know, branches like, because M35 brings EM123. All modern, there's a fact in genetics. All modern carriers of this lineage descend from a common ancestor who lived only 1,200 years ago. And all are Ashkenazi Jews. And they are currently called, that's what they're calling the generation, Ashkenazi Jews. Yet, note this, that M215, for those that probably is digging into the deeper detail, which is E3B, that's what they call it, E3B, M215, those are going to be actually, in long story short, your real Ishmaelites. They're going to be the real ones, which is actually brings forth E1, B1, B1, B2, M281. Now, the reason why is because I was making I like to make questions and give it to family tree DNA to verify some things and whatnot. I want to show you a really interesting, just to give one more interesting quote. I'll let this be a modern quote from family tree DNA. What they said on these finds, that, you know, how they said, how the brother was just showing you that E is actually from the Middle East. Mm-hmm. I want to show you with a confirmation from family tree, because they like to try to hide this stuff, but they will not deny this fact that the E lineage is originally going to be from the Middle East. They'll try to backtrack and say, well, maybe, you know, that's possibilities, but they'll use the word. Remember how I showed you in genetics, they'll use hypothetic words instead of the solid, like it's truly solid.
Facts.
But I'm gonna show you. Yep, go ahead.
And before he even get to that, just remember that they are claiming that this E branch, well, they know that this E branch is from the Middle East, like he was saying, but they are only claiming one branch of it, because that's the right branch they have. They have E1B1B, so they're going to claim that is the Israelite DNA, just that's because it's from the Levant. But what we saying is, according to our oral traditions, according to our people, you get what I'm saying? It can't be nothing but E1B1A.
That's right. E1B1A is the lineage. In fact, this is what I just, long story short, I asked them, you know, something about E1B1A. It says that, you know, it said the E haplogroups found in Israel, if I'm M2, which is basically E1B1A1 haplogroups, would that mean that I'm Middle Eastern? Then I just gave them some information just to show that I know the information and stuff like that, whatnot. And look what they say. They say E-M2, this is family tree DNA. It says E-M2 is common throughout sub-Saharan Africa, right? It's lower Africa and whatnot. And also in the Near East. So it could represent a back migration from the Near East. Now, obviously, taking in consideration with the history, because
hold on, read that again. Read that again.
So you hear what it just said there?
Read that
again.
That's
period. Yep, you see that period right there? It says that E-M2 is common throughout sub-Saharan Africa and also in the Near East. So it could represent a back migration from the Near East. If it wasn't true, they wouldn't say anything like that. But this shows you that modern genetics know that is true. Yet this is something that they keep on saying, that the people are African. So if they say that it could represent, But we know it does represent because we have solid facts, solid information to know
Yeah,
that it does represent.
yeah, they
That's
just confirmed that for us.
There it is. That's exactly what they did. They completely confirmed that the ones that are E lineage are actually going to be Middle Eastern. That's actually what they are. In fact, I got a quote. I got one more quote. I'm gonna show you how a genetics slip up and actually say that they're Middle Eastern. I'm gonna show you a quote I found by accident, and I didn't know how much it has so much meat in this quote. But I'm gonna show you this quote that I was just looking at when I was debunking this one geneticist that was trying to say the T haplogroup might be Israel. Now, obviously, it's found in the land of Israel, but you got to trace it and everything and whatnot. But I want to read you something that geneticists say on these things. I'm going to show you something real fast down here. I'm just going to find it, how that's worded on this thing. It really is interesting. Matter of fact, I might open up the text if I don't find it super fast. Let me actually open this PDF and then show you on this PDF. I'm gonna open up this PDF and then I'm gonna show you where they actually word for word geneticists, right? Remember, so you see this? This is gonna be geneticists right here, 2014. Now remember, after 2014, that's when they find out the truth. 2014 is when they find out the truth. So remember, 2014. And then it just talks about them, obviously December, right? December. And then going on all the way to January, December, all the way 2014. Now I'm gonna go down and I'm gonna show you something. I'm gonna show you something here, what they say. I'll show you something real fast. Okay, watch what they say here. Watch what they say here on this genetic piece of information. Let me just zoom in so you can see this. Watch what they say here. All right. Let me go down for that spot. Let me go right to that direct spot on there. I don't know if I just went too far down because I want you to see this thing. Let me go up. Okay, right here. Watch what it says here. It says this: the Middle Eastern haplogroups D and E split 42,000 basically years ago. You heard what he just said there?
It split.
They just basically said that the A and D lineages are the Middle Eastern haplogroups.
Yeah. There we go. Like we brought out earlier, even you said earlier in the beginning that D&E split from the Middle East. So we not just saying things just to be saying it, family.
That's right. So now you know the truth of what they're hiding, what they're actually putting in the background, and what they're talking about amongst themselves. They know this. They know that this group is Middle Eastern because they were like, what are you talking about? Why are you calling E Middle Eastern? What are you talking about? But he's actually saying that they split in the Middle East and they're both Middle Eastern because D is actually Japanese, found in Japan. And then your E lineage, they know for a fact that's the Natufian, the ones they found in the Levant. And that's why they say they split in the Middle East. So you see it yourself from geneticists say it themselves that indeed, the E1B1A lineage actually is going to be traced back to the Middle East.
Facts. And if you can answer this question, maybe the sister asked, what about E2B1? I guess. If you want to expound on that, what haplogroup that is or what it'll fall under.
E2B1. Oh, okay. I know what that is already. That's going to be a different lineage. Let me go up real fast. That's going to actually be E2. E1 and then E2 is two different lineages. But let me go. I'll just click this. And you may note on here, you probably used to E1B1B being called Ishmael. Just understand that has to do with other information when doing historical reports on, where the Arabs went and a little bit on them. But let me show that on this thing real fast. I'll show you basically what because it's actually E2. That's actually what it is. It's E1 and then there's E2. And, just to make it plain and simple, here's a little idea. Let me go a little more further back one over here. Oh, right here. Right here. So right here, you see this E1 and then there's going to be your E2, and you're probably going to see it under M75, and then it goes down. So it's just a sub branch of E2. That's really what it is. Unfortunately, if someone's that, they would be not leading down into your E1B1A lineage. That would be a different branch.
You'll still be Semitic though.
You'll definitely be Shemitic without a doubt. Doubtless, we find E2 and E1, because remember it's E1B, but there's going to be E2s and there's your E1As, but E1B leads your E1B1A. So it's actually that's how precise it is. Actually, in a way, almost precise in a way. But that's actually what we see. These other lineages, all Shemitic lines from Shem. They're all Shemitic lines from Shem. But you're going to have your one lineage that's known to be that lineage of the Jews. That's going to be your E1B1A. So I guess just to make that simple, that other lineage is just going to be your E2, right from the break right there. Really close to the root of the split. Because remember, E1B1 is the lineage that makes those ones that's found in the Levant.
Right.
E1B1. So I guess, to make that simple, that's pretty much the answer to that.
Come on. So the brother Zoe asks, is E2 Ishmael?
There is, I'm going to show this. I should show this right now. There is a chart. And the reason why the brother who made the chart, he was actually bringing the best chart at that time that was possible. And he did fairly well for the chart that he had at that time, even to get that E1B1A lineage.
And if anybody has any more questions, feel free to drop in the chat.
Amen. And this stuff I'm used to this stuff because I work in the medical field. So this is like just a change of pace. But, it's like this was a great chart at that time. The reason why I say at that time, because that was a change. That was a change that had happened. They changed the information. Not that they changed it as an altered information, but they changed it because there was a branch missing. And that's why they start doing those big Ys and stuff like that to get more results in between and stuff. But they got the whole tree now. They know what's going on pretty much. Right here, you see this branch right here. This was missing in the old one. And this will work. This design would work. But with this extra one in the new design, it doesn't work. The reason why is because E1, I'm going to close this. E1 on this chart, if you notice, I'm actually go back. Let me actually go to this one because that one that I just had is going to break it down. Okay. Let me see right here. So you see this E1. So on this chart, it says it starts at E1 right there. And then it brings forth E1B and E1A. And then they'll say that this is Ishmael from Hagar and everything from Keturah. Then you got to, you ask yourself, who's Keturah? Keturah also going to bring forth E1A? Now it's possible that you can have the same lineage of them, but then you got to follow the history of who has E1B1, who has E1A. And E1A doesn't show signs of it being Ishmaelites or the ones of the Arabs. E1A is actually going to be a different lineage, but E1B1B shows that these are Ishmaelites. And I'm going to show you also the connection, how these are connected. So this one right here, I'm also going to show you how the branches open. Right here is going to be that. This is what they say on here. This is the one that a lot of people got used to right here. And then it says, you're going to have your E1B. And that's going to be your pretty much P2 right there. It's actually E1B, but you got your 1 right there, just E1B, that's just P2. This is actually just P2 pretty much. And then it comes down, and then you see your split from, and now this is where it gets interesting. Because right here, this would work if it was like this, but it's after the update, there was a change. So you can see if this was Abraham, and this was Isaac, and this would be, they would say, this would be Jacob, and they would say this would be Esau. But the problem is we have a lot of high evidence of this being Ishmaelites because it's recorded in history of them being the Arabs of the line of the ones from Arabia, and even the ones that went all the way over. And they grew massive. And remember, there was 12 princes of them, and they grew massive. So the history matches more with Ishmael than it does with Esau. But we can find Esau. There is ways to find Esau. I actually have an interesting quote. That Esau would be more close to E1B1C, which actually would be a branch, which also, looking at this, it's also important to notice that there's a branch from this branch. This is why it's important to know, because from E1B1A there's another branch. There's another family line that's a private family line that is not Israel. That would basically mean that Israel would have a son that pretty much what's the word I'm looking for? That pretty much was cut short. So there's a family tree. This is the whole family tree of this E1B1C. There's a family tree which comes from, I'm gonna show you right here. There's a family tree on the other design. That side was over here. So technically, this was actually right. This was actually right because as it says E1B1B, at that time, E1B1C was on that side with E1B1B. So when they were saying that's Esau, technically it was Esau because at that time they messed up and put E1B1C at this side. But ever since that variant right there, it actually showed that E1B1C was actually on this side. E1B1C was actually on this side. And that changes a major picture because you see this branch right here. This is actually going to be a brother. This is going to be a brother of that lineage of P2. Let me just show you real fast. Not to make it too complex, but just to show it in the detail on what geneticists see when they look at these things. You can see right here, there's another branch, right? There's another branch right here. And this is actually another family tree. This is another family tree. This is your E1B1A2, which is actually E1B1AC. This is actually going to be another family tree. So you're going to have one line from your M2, but then another family tree. And that's why this worked at that time. But because of the C, because that's actually another split, it doesn't work. Because then you wouldn't get the 12 branches breaking uniformly from, because at this time, this was E1B1A. This was right. Because at that time, this was E1B1A M2. But now this is actually not M2 anymore because of that. There's an in-between in there. Just to make it simple, that there's another family tree that needs to be given a name. And if you break it like this at E1B1, then that's being Abraham. Then that breaks, and then you'll get your Ishmaelite lines. And that matches with history. E1B1B matches with history. That's why you see that in the Ashkenazi and stuff like that. And then you actually have another split where you're going to have, obviously, your E1B1A. That's actually going to be V38. That's that new one. That was just showing you V38, and then you're going to have your M2. Now your M2, that E1B1A, that M2, previously it was E1, it was right here. But seeing that there was an in-between and another family tree because that right there, your E1B1C being added to this family. And that's how and also, like I was saying, how we know that's Esau. How do we know that's Esau and how that was a different family? Is because we also was looking at those people genetically, and there's only one people. I forgot how you say it, the Omic people. I think they're called Omic. We go down a little bit to them. So these people, they dye their hair red. So they have some very interesting practices, practices that they do. So they dye their hair red and stuff like that. But they're E1B1C. This group is E1B1C. And remember, Ishmael mixed with pretty much Canaanites and Hivites and Hittites, right? That's also important to know that he mixed with them. And so these actually have a practice like that. And not just that, there's also, I copy it on here. There's an interesting saying. Let me see if I did paste that here. There's an interesting saying that just basically lets us know that this group was moving with certain groups and whatnot. And I wonder why I didn't put that one here. I'm just looking here to see if I have that one on this thing. That's why always when you find a source that you think is important but may not be important at that time, just put it. Save it, because you never know. That was one of those things. I also had a quote that this was a different group. That this, you can probably find it. E1B1C is a different group. Just talks about an E1B1C or E1B1A1A or M329. I just talk about how it seems to be Ishmael, because following with the genetic lines and following their traditions, that red hair, that's a very interesting tradition. Also their genetics is very interesting as well. And then seeing that this is a private line. This line right here is not part. It's breaks from, you can see right here, these long, all these other clades right here, all these other groups that come from it. I'm just going to show it simply on that thing again, on that change of the chart right here. So because the chart change and that C is over there, that's another family tree. That's going to be a brother basically to your E1B1A1 line. So you see your M2 right there, your M2, which you see how it kind of, these break, it's like right here, this is P2. So P2 is E1B1. And then you have your right here V38, which is actually your E1A. That's your new E1A. Your V38 is your V right here, V38. That's actually your E1A. But then you got your M2, which is actually going to be your E1B1A1. That's actually what that is. It's that last, these like this, they just branch off like that to show you that the N one. See right there, M2, it used to be your E1B1A. It used to be your E1B1A. But now is actually going to be E1B1A1. And that's going to be your M2, your new M2. And yet you got another family right from Isaac. You got another family. So right here, you're going to have another family tree. You see where it comes from Isaac? Right here. This is another family tree right here, this branch. So you see this inside right here. These are all Israel. Inside this yellow is Israel. These are the 12 branches that I was talking about. These will basically bring forth 12 lineages. Don't ask me how it breaks, but the geneticists know. They know how it breaks into 12 branches, how it's 12 branches directly from your M2 that's going to bring those. But those are going to be your Israelite lines. And then outside is going to be that extra Esau line
Come
right
on,
there.
come on. Okay. If that explained it for the brother, let's see. Brother asks, who are the mixed multitude? Who are the mixed multitude?
The mixed multitude, I'm gonna open up a note real fast. Maybe we should talk about this one day, brother. We should talk about Gog and Magog a little bit, if you ever want to. Gog and Magog is actually that mixed multitude. I just show you a real quick picture just to make it plain and simple. I mean to click that. Let me see, where is that? Right here. Just to make it plain and simple, when you think of how, you know how the scripture says a mingled company and stuff like that, and Gog and Magog and stuff like that. Long story short, in the end of the day, the whole world, after studying almost every Japhetic lineage, almost still got to get to some of the Chinese ones, the smaller ones and isolated areas, but get into your major ones. The biggest picture is that the R lineage pretty much consumed the whole world. The R lineage pretty much consumed the whole world, and it's also mingled with many different peoples and everything like that. Here's just a picture that basically gives us understanding. The people who colonized the world were Germanic tribes. That's who colonized the world. In fact, I'm going to give you a quick rundown on history based on this picture right here. Remember, the slave trade started with the Portuguese, right? They're the ones who started the slave trade. It's also important when the Ottomans came in, right? The Seljuk Turks, they came from this area and they came down around this area and around this area. Remember, Rome, during Constantine time, Rome was right here at this time. And who took out the Rome over here? There was people that was pushed by the Huns. The Huns were pushing a group they called the barbarians. These are going to be your Japhetic lines. These are going to be your J's, your R's, things like that being pushed. These are going to be a different clad that's being pushed this way. And then what happens is they hit Rome, right? You probably heard of it, like when they say the barbarians about the 3rd or 4th century, they destroyed Rome, but they didn't actually destroy Rome. They invaded it and they took over it. And then later on, during the time when the Franks came, the Franks are also a Germanic tribe. The Franks, who you know as the France, they came there and they also were Germanic as these people, but they all had their own confederacy. And they actually basically made a union with Rome. France made a union with Rome for a long time. And that was about, your 700s, your 800s, around that time. And that would be a Germanic. And that's why this is colored like that. These are Germanic tribes. And they reached, I'm going to show you an interesting picture. They actually reached in a time all the way. The story is they actually started as the Scythians and they stretched out because we can follow their genetics the whole way. And they reached all the way to Ireland and Wales and stuff like that. These were Germanic tribes because the Scythians were actually mingling with people, but they were mainly R. They had a royal line of R. And what happened was when they got to this land, they end up settling this land, and they end up also, what's interesting too, you know the name America? It also comes from the Germanic tribes. They had a place in their land called America, in a
Interesting.
sense. And that's where you see also Britain or Britannia, how you say that? There's actually going to be another place in Hispanica, right? Or how you say that?
Hispaniola.
Hispaniola, right? That's going to be a lot of the Germanic tribes is the 6th century, right here, where you had America and you had all these connected, and that's how you get the individuals from Spain. They're also going to be connected to the Germanic tribes. They're all pieces that's connected. And they remember they colonized America. That's where that word came from. That word also came from the Germanic tribes. We can look at the root of the words and stuff and see that that's a Celtic dialect called, obviously, from the Britain, right? Actually comes from the word that makes Britain and all that stuff, like, and whatnot, from ancient vocabulary. And they say American, right? Like
Yeah,
American,
yeah.
American, right? American. Gaul, right? The Gaul, they all connected. They're all connected with the France and everything. These are actually Germanic tribes that actually came together, and basically they came together and said, you know what? I want to conquer the world. Do you want to conquer the world? They're like, yeah, I want to conquer the world. You want to conquer the world? And said, and basically Spain came together and said, you take this side and I'll take this side. Spain and Portugal divided the world amongst themselves, but the world said, you know what? I don't know why they're saying that they're going to divide the world amongst themselves. We're all going to get a piece of this. But there was a time they've been going at war. They was going at it. But then there was a time of the Berlin divide of Africa in 1844. And they basically came together and they said, you know what? Africa is huge, massive. So we're not going to fight over it. Let's actually just choose what we're going to do. So they said, you're going to take this part, you take this part. They sat down at a table and actually broke it down like a pie and said, you take this piece, you take that piece. And it's also important. Also, these were connected during the time of the Seleucid kingdom. When the Greeks took over, the Seleucids came down and they came all the way to India. They also, that's the first time in a long time that they connected what is called the Silk Road with China. So they connected the Silk Road from a distance because the Scythians were ruling over here and no one could beat them. No one was able to beat the Scythians. So these groups couldn't go to these groups because the Scythians were just a threat. And the Chinese were trying to get the Scythians to help them with the Mongols, but the Scythians were like, no, we're not going to help you. And so the Scythians were just pretty much there, just, a problem, just a problem, just being in the area. And that's also the Germanic tribe. They came over here and they also are part of the Germanic tribes as well. They also came, remember how I said the Seljuk Turks? The Seljuk Turks also having that mingled company, they're also of the same groupings pretty much, because we can look at their genetics. And that's why I was showing you on that picture with those Turks and the Ashkenazi and everything. They're all the same pretty much. And they came down and they settled all in the Middle East. This actually is all red because this is pretty much all the areas that was settled by the Germanic tribes. And they also came here, right? And it's also important who took this. Russia was the one who also started colonizing these areas, and they took some of these individuals here, enslaved some of these people and made them slaves. Also, is known that some of the people who started the slave trade, they settled in this area right here. One side over here is called New Guinea. How you say that? Yeah, New Guinea. New Guinea actually would be over here, and that was settled by Spain. So you know what they were doing. If it's Spain, they probably bringing people over there from Israel, because we can see some very interesting things that had happened, like some of the Japanese art during the time of the 1600 of the dark-skinned people moving around over there in Japan and stuff like that. That was pretty much going around shopping. That they had paintings of. That they actually named them pretty much after the Portuguese because of what was going on. So obviously America, without a doubt, that's going to be your Germanics that came here. That was one of the major stations. And also here, right? There was also a thing that happened here compared to the Americas called pretty much whiting out the people, that they took the people and put them here and they were trying to mix with them and make them, white them out. That's actually what they were really doing. They were it's actually a technical term. They were white them out. They was doing a whiting out thing. So the whole world, long story short, when you look at the genetics of the whole world, you're going to see a spiral of the same type of genetics, especially our lineages. You're going to see something like this usually on when you look at the genetics. You can look it up. That's an interesting video of pretty much showing all the genetics of the world in a way. This is probably it right here. I'm not gonna let it play too long, but I'll just show you. No, not this. This is just some. That's just some interesting information to show how Gog and Magog was in London. How London also admits that they had Gog and Magog figurines, and everything. But you can find it if you type down, European haplogroups. You can find it on YouTube. They'll show you like a whole bunch of ones from all over the world, and they look the same. You got R's, you got I's, you got J's, you got Q's. That's why the Lord, He understand when I say this. I believe that anyone can be saved. I believe that it's important to know the truth. That's why I think it's important to understand these genetics. But if anyone tries to lie and say they're Israel, they might be brought to shame if they don't have the lineage of Israel when we're actually looking at those things. Because the Lord is going to make it very clear who's Israel and who's not Israel. But those who are saved by faith is saved by faith. But there's also a blessing for the woman that goes in the wilderness, and that's going to actually bring to light what's going to happen. But this is prophecy. But talking genetics, talking prophecy, these are actually united. Talking genetics and prophecy goes hand in hand. It goes hand in hand, and that's
Facts.
what we're seeing. So just I guess to make the story clear, 100%, our lineage is found in the Scythians. The Scythians are also known as in history, historically recorded as Gog and Magog, the Scythians. They were known throughout all history. They were the ones who were known as Gog, as Magog. So just I guess an understanding on that. That's the truth of what's going on. That this whole world is pretty much devoured. This is Isaiah 34 coming to life.
Right. And as well, if he was speaking in regards to the mixed multitude in Exodus, if you turn to Nehemiah 13 verses 1 through 3, it'll let you know that that mixed multitude that left with us in Exodus were actually separated from Israel after the laws were written, after the laws of Moses or the books of Moses was written to the audience, the Ammonite and the Moabite, that they should not enter the congregation. Verse 3 tells us that after they heard the law, that they separated from Israel all the mixed multitude. So Nehemiah chapter 13 verses 1 through 3.
Wow, that's so they basically they said this law is way too dramatic. You guys, good luck. You have to keep this law. So you guys, good luck.
Right. So that mixed multitude eventually separated from the Israelites anyways. It's pertaining to that Exodus mixed multitude.
That's something.
But the sister Zipporah asked, is EM54 same as E2?
I was actually looking up that because I'm not too. I'm trying to see if that is actually because what's also important. I got to make sure I mention this. If you take DNA tests, if someone takes a male or female DNA test, ensure to be careful where you go to. I know you can transfer your information to different companies, but you want to go to something like Family Tree DNA because you got to be careful of things like autosomal tests. A lot of tests, like for example, 23andMe doesn't do Y and mtDNA tests. They give you. I asked them themselves, like, do you just give just direct Y DNA? They said no. They give us both. They do autosomal. They look at the autosomal test to show us the connection between those things. So certain tests you want to be careful of. But I'm looking at that ME because I'm not 100% familiar with it right offhand, but I'm going to look to see if it is just a sub branch. I'm going to take a look if it's a branch of this one real fast. M45, just looking here. M54, just taking a look to see if it's familiar on any of these. Not on these ones, but what I can do is I'm a check. It is a Y chromosome, but I'm gonna see where does it lead to. Mm-hmm. It is a child of EM98. Let me just see. That one sounds familiar, more familiar. I'm just gonna go to it on the tree, well, on Wiki, just to get a good idea of it. I'm gonna see if this has a tree. No, this doesn't have a tree. We'll go back real fast down here. Right. Is this the one? I'm just gonna check on here, maybe just to see if it is on here, just to get an idea. Because might be, just don't seem familiar. Let me see if it is one of these branches. Yeah, so it is going to be E2B. It's going to be E2B. EM54 is E2B. Just they don't have a channel, but they don't have a one on the sometimes it's like that. Sometimes they, for certain ones that may be like smaller branches, they don't make a wiki channel for it, but it's not hard to find. That's probably what they see it familiar, but just to make it clear, I guess, on that. That's going to be that E2B one. Yeah, that's
Go ahead.
Yeah, that one's an interesting one. And I'll definitely keep that noted from now on, because I like to, note these lines.
Right. But as you've all saw today, family, we've brought forth the proof, the information, the sources. I'm going to leave a link, actually, once we get done, to the Google slides I did, so you all can get all the sources off of them. The links will be to the side under comment, so you can get it that way. But we have indeed showed the evidence that our fathers originated in the Middle East and the so-called, what was that area, the Mesopotamia area, before they came down to the Middle East, right? As the Bible told us. And that eventually they migrated into Africa. We know various events such as the Babylonian captivity would have led to migration, the Assyrian captivity, Persian, right? 70 AD. And a lot of the times our people would go into North Africa first before even migrating down to the Sahara. So again, we brought out all that information, as well as showing that the E branch didn't even come into Africa, right? Or specifically ours didn't come into the sub-Saharan African regions until around the time of the Bantu expansion.
I love how one of the ones in the comment, I didn't even notice Gogo, what they said, how they said, because that's true. The Natufian don't have Neanderthal genetics. That's a true statement. I wanted to also comment, the brother Jay. Yeah, I thought that was interesting too. When we type down Jay, it does say that it was Canaanites, but the complexity to the story is more complex. That the Jay lineage is Japhetic, but it came and settled in the land of Canaan. But it wasn't just J. It was J, R, T, Q. It was all types of lineages at the same time, at the same exact time. It was like a mingled company that came at the same time into Canaan and settled in that land. That's why if you see some of the things where they talk about the Canaanites, it's also important to note that the Canaanites, when they came from the land of Crete, it'll tell you that they landed in what's that, Cyprus, or that island, pretty much. I guess I should
Cyprus.
Cyprus, yeah. Cyprus. They found their genetics in Cyprus. They took Cyprus. They took the coast of the Phoenicians. They took the original Canaanites. They took their coast. They took the land of the Philistines. They were all the same people. They made a confederacy. Is recorded in a document by Ramses II that they made a confederacy, a bunch of groups, and they came to basically come and slaughter everyone. And this time they call it the Bronze Age collapse, right? They came from this area, and actually they came from this area, this area, this area. They came in like a swarm, and they basically hit everyone hard. They hit all the groups hard, where they all fell, and they call it the Bronze Age collapse. And that's when they settled in these areas, even though they're named Canaan and they're named Phoenician. That's just like, America. Like if someone was to invade America, they're called American, but yet they're not from America.
That's also going into that source that was saying earlier, the Indo-Europeans came in after the Natufians and basically took on the Semitic languages and culture and animals and stuff like that.
That's right. They came down there during the time, because remember the Natufians have a lot of E1B1B. And the reason why is because that Natufian lineage, you got to remember Abraham's family, his family was all throughout these places. So you're going to see a lot of E until the time that Israel came. And remember, when they came and settled here, Israel was down here. So while that was all going on, that J settling there, Israel was coming out of the wilderness, which also makes it very interesting how they say that they were over here. Yet we also know, Israel is making their way and coming to these areas, and still then, make their way up here until about the time of David. About the time of David, when they started to come up there. But we see that in Sidon, they were there in time, way back. So it's really interesting, to see this group settle in these areas and whatnot, depending on your idea of the way that is all structured, the way that it's structured. When I say structured, the years, because they actually, it's important to know that the years for the Egyptians is off. Historically, it's off, and they know it because some different controversy I won't go into right now. But this is just something to understand, that when they came down, right, when we think about the Sea Peoples, the classic story is that they came from this area, they settled here, and they also came here and they took these areas, and they took a lot of, they destroyed a lot of people in the Middle East. They destroyed a lot, and there was a famine, there was all types of stuff going on. And that's why it says that predominantly J was up there, because the major group of them all was J. In this area was J, majorly J up here and majorly R down here. So majorly J here, majorly R over here. That was in those areas. So they pretty much just, with a wave of destruction, took over the Middle East, the top area. Also, I forgot to show this real fast. I'll show this like in 30 seconds. CT, like I was talking about, CT makes, you can see from CT comes CF, which brings forth all your Japhetic lineages. As you can see, they're all right here, J, I, J, K, all those ones, Q, R, all those, all the way to T. T comes from L and all that stuff right there. Go up real fast. That comes from K. If you close CF, you also can see CT brings CF and DE. So remember, DE is going to bring your D and E lineages. So you can see those things just to show that split on that. And then all those right there, they try to show that they're going down like this, creating these, but that's actually not true. It's actually a split that makes A and B lineages. And A and B lineages are lineages of their own. CT makes lineages of their own. So you can see with those things pretty much. But they're all connected to Adam.
Right. So let me just share this real quick, just so we can put a face on these early Natufian descendants, I guess you can say. Those carriers. All right, so these would be a Semitic speaking people, as we see they dark skinned or melanated brothers. All right, beards froze. You want to see some more, such as these. All right, figure 121 ancient Egyptian painting of the brickyard with Asiatic captives engaged in brick making. The Hebrew slaves working in their Egyptian brickyard must have looked like this when Moses led them forth into Asia, aka the Levant. So this is what they look like. This is a clear depiction taken directly from the walls of Egypt. All right. This is a terracotta head of a Semite found in Egypt, marked Hebrew. All right, so here we go. There we go, another one. Another example showing a sculpture of a Jewish slave in Egypt. Tans bound behind his back. You see his skin color and all that stuff. Right here's another example. You can't tell who the Egyptian is and the Israelite. Right? Egyptian beating a Hebrew slave. This is found in the tomb of Rekhmire in the 15th century BCE. And there's a few more pictures from the Babylonian captivity. These people are still depicted as woolly-haired, woolly-bearded Negroes, right? And they will be carrying that E haplogroup that got passed down to us. All right.
There it is.
Woolly-haired Negroes, man. And people like to say these are the noses of Yemenite Jews, and like, nah, we got a lot of brothers that have the same exact nose to this day. So we can't, you get what I'm saying, try to say that these are the Yemenites or the so-called Middle Easterners type of nose when we see people in sub-Saharan Africa with the same exact nose. Right there we go again. And look, that brother got the same exact nose right there.
Yeah, it looks
So just
very.
a
Yeah,
few more examples. All right. They got BBs, man.
yeah.
And of course the Assyrian brothers and sisters from the Syrian captivity, they got locks coming down the back of their heads. So just putting
So
some.
yeah, so it shows, you know, the looks, the genetics, all of is matching. All the looks and the genetics are matching. Also, you know, we always remember, you know, we're getting in genetics is solid what we're talking about when we think about E1B1A being Israel and then, you know, those being Shemites. Now, when we talk about tribes, who is who specifically, like who is Edom, who is Moab, who is, that's when we gotta, you know, we gotta set that aside. What we gotta first find out is who is Israel, instead of trying to worry about who is Edom, Moab, and all those things. Because if we start to try to figure out who are those certain characters, then we start to get to the point where we're trying to get to a nitty gritty of we need a little more information on who is who and matching those genetics to that person historically. We got to make sure we connect it historically to those genetics. Because one of the biggest things, remember, not just that long ago, the world was rampant. When we think about world, Israel was rampant with the 12 tribes chart, right? And we know that genetics don't support the 12 tribes chart at all. It wouldn't make sense in any degree of the look. If they're not E1B1A, a lot of the 12 tribes chart was based off of looking at skin color, and it wasn't also off of genetics. That's also important to know. So, you know, when we're looking at the genetics, if we get a clear picture of who is the Shemitic line and who is Israel, then we get an idea of those things, because then we're trying to figure out. Now, there's also important to know about prophecy. Prophecy also said that the line of Esau, the male's line, was going to be cut off, but the female's line is, you know, another story. There's another story on those things. Because remember, Esau also took the women of Ishmael. But, you know, this is going to be the thing where Ishmael, Esau merged together. And remember, what did the Ashkenazi say? What is their right of return? Through the female's line. So what if Yah, being the God that he is, recompenses the nations, as in they say that it's through the female's line, and having the Esau female's line, what if they're judged in that sense of that? Now, when I say that in that sense, understand the Lord is going to judge in the sense of the flesh for those who don't take with Christ. That's that's prophecy. That's a fact in prophecy. So that's why he says whoever's, you know, not with him, is they're considered naked, as he's going to judge them by who they are, what they are. That's why he says he recompense the fathers from generation to generations, because he said, are you not he that I called, as you read in Ezekiel 48 and 49, as he says that he's surely going to destroy Gog and Magog. That's important to know that when we look at those genetics, obviously the male's line, when we consider the male's line, we got to be careful on who we say is who, because male's line, there's three branches, there's three breaks. And we got to know what is Japhetic, what is Hamitic, and what is going to be Shemitic. And that's how we're going to get a clear piece. But when we start to break down the pieces on the E lineage, on who is Esau, who is Ishmael, just be careful to match history with who we are actually declaring it as. So that way we're not saying someone is Esau when they might not be Esau, and yet the truth might be enlightening. You know, the truth, like, for example, you know, a lot of people that were saying that a lot of they say Caucasians were Esau, but we know that's not true. A lot of them are actually Japhetic, without a doubt. But in a sense, when we think about Esau, we're not just looking for a male's line. That's what we got to also remember. We also got to remember what they said. They ran with what they said. They said it's the woman's line. So obviously the Lord hears these things. And also not just that, but also Esau is in a sense a spiritual declaration of someone who hates their brother. You got to also remember the whole nation. Remember what Yah says. He says the whole world was against you. The whole world. So it actually counts the whole world. In fact, in Zechariah 12, it breaks down and say that pretty much, you know, like how they say the apple of my eye, says anyone who touches you, they're also going to be destroyed. And yet we know that the whole world did. Just like it's talked about in Joel 3. Joel 3 talks about that the whole world took part in selling Israel. And that's what the whole scriptures is also talking about, that the whole world was going to be against them. That's why it says in Romans 11, they are enemies for your sake, but for the gospel, they are beloved for the Father's sake.
Facts. And I just want to share this, one of these last sources that we're going to be bringing out, just to verify what we've been bringing out this far. Even when the brother showed you all the E1B1A graph and where they were at, basically sub-Saharan Africa, all right? We have to read something real quick to just verify that even more, all right? It says, let's see. The Hebrews of North, East, and West Africa, particularly Ethiopia, are Phoenician. They settled from Morocco, right, to Angola. So the whole sub-Saharan Africa part. It says most of them have been absorbed into other tribes, right? We read that when we came in, we took over those tribes and replaced them, right? So there you go. He goes on to say the Hebrews of India are called Cochin. They are supposed to have settled in that part of India, blah, blah, blah. So that ain't going to nothing, but I just wanted to show you all really that, as it said, the Hebrews settled from Morocco to Angola, the same place you see that E1B1A dispersed at today.
Right.
So if anybody has any more questions, or if you want to go into anything else before we wrap up.
Yeah, I'll wrap this up with this picture right here. We're all born in Babylon. Just to make it plain and simple, the whole world is Babylon. And the reason why I say that is because, when you think about the Holy Roman Empire, I want to read you a quote that this historian says. He says this about the Roman Empire. He says, the Holy Roman Empire, it says that it was neither holy nor Roman nor an empire, because what the Roman Empire was actually a German state. That's actually what they call the Holy Roman Empire. It actually was. This is actually what it was. This is what it was. They call it the Roman Empire. But remember, it had a union. It had a union with France. And remember, England owned this. And remember, then they was going at it, England and France and stuff. But France also had a union with the Germanic tribes. Now, this is actually the Rhine. You heard it. This is actually interesting because genetically, these groups are connected with the Ashkenaz because they're Germans.
I was just about to say a lot of the Ashkenazis migrated through the Rhine on their way to Spain. Yeah,
that's right, and that's what this empire, this Germanic empire that they call the Roman Empire, was named after. The whole story is actually very interesting. I was studying that when I was studying some things about the Roman Empire and stuff. It's actually just Germanic. They're not the original Romans, and they're not even the original people that were there. It's just a bunch of barbarians. That's actually what they are. They call them barbarians because they came in, they were a group, but long story short, they call them Germanic. These groups that pretty much conquered the whole world, which you see them in the whole world, these groups are actually going to be a confederacy of multiple tribes united in one area, but they are not one piece like this. This is actually this is a fairy tale. This doesn't actually look like this. The way that it actually looked in that time, let me show you right here. This is actually what it looked like. They wasn't even united. This is in the late 15th century. I'm talking about the one with France and stuff. Obviously, it fell, and then remember, it came back, and then it was working with France, trying to keep itself. But France was also a Germanic tribe. These were Germanic tribes too. They were the barbarians that came in and settled in Rome in that area. There was a whole different people. It was a totally different people. And in fact, the Pope today, he's actually of the Germanic tribes. He's like a direct descendant of the Germanic tribes than some of the other ones that were there for a while, because they end up settling in that little floating city they had. But that didn't go so well when things were, going down. But this is actually that area. So you got the area where you have the Franks and then you have the Germanics, but they were all the same people. Even genetically, if we look at them, they're all the same people. It was never, after it fell, it was never a united group. But they did call it, as you see, they did call it Rome, but they were never united. If you see throughout all history, they were constantly going at it with each other. They were never fully united. But there is a place today called Rome where they had a centerpiece there, but they're still going to be a majorly mingled people. I guess just to make that simple. But I'll probably maybe I'll give this to Will and give this, because this also just goes over some of the history of it and all the things of it. It's quite complex, but this is just the best way to sum it up. It was not even an empire. It wasn't even
Right.
Roman, and it wasn't holy. Rome
Facts.
was weak. Rome was weak at that time. It was very weak. I guess to make it plain.
That makes sense. That makes sense. But I hope everyone enjoyed the video today, family, as we basically just brought the evidence to show forth that we are indeed Afro-Asiatics, Semitic Negroes, however you wanna, however you wanna put it. The original Levantines, all right. We are that, and we migrated it into Africa over certain events, certain waves, certain migrations, right? Different events that led us into sub-Saharan Africa, to the places that we are dispersed. All right. And bro, I think we gotta do something again. Probably
Yeah.
probably breaking out the genetic evidence on these Native Americans.
Oh, you in for one, because I just solved a really interesting mystery. I just did a live just recently, and I solved a really interesting mystery of the because you can't dig up ancient genetics of the Americans in America. So I had to do a workaround, and I found out, that the long story short, the Native Americans are actually going to be some of the Acadians that crossed over from Russia and went over to America and went all the way down to Peru. And they also was a group of, because Acadians, they root in cuneiform. They root in cuneiform, and we actually find ancient cuneiform in America, which is interesting because that's something that the Scythians and Sumerians and Acadians had, which is actually your European nations.
Okay, so we're gonna have to do a little tag team with the history and the DNA, just proving that once more that they not our people, because as the brother said in the beginning, the Y haplogroup is passed down from father to father. No matter how you look, if they was our people, they would have that E branch.
Yeah, and it looks like the Canaanites probably came over too, because their genetics is linked. Okay. So it's really interesting. Y'all willing, we'll touch on some of these things. And it was good, having this holy conversation with the brother and the family. I hope we can always grow in this stuff. And it's good to have, you got some very active members. I love that we got members that like to dig into these deep information. It look like a lot of people already know about this stuff. So that's good that we're starting to take in this information on how valuable it actually is, because the life is in the blood. The life is in the blood.
Yeah, man, we gotta over the last few months, years, a lot of us been going at it with the counts, but it's like we gotta go at the Ashkenazis and the other people that actually know the truth, because that will put us on the forefront. That will actually put us on the forefront of recognition and everything. And this someone just asked real quick if you want to answer that, who are modern Italians?
I think I just had that's a great picture, because that's in Italy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And basically, if you look up Italy, I'm just gonna grab it real fast, and you look at their haplogroup, they're gonna have a major R, but they're not just gonna only be R. That's what's important to know when looking at these groups. They're not just gonna be one group. They're usually not just one group. They're usually gonna be mingled groups. And I guess just to make it simple, they're going to be the Scythians, a group of the Scythians close to them, because they have that E1B, and they also they also have E lineages there. They have E lineages there, so that's gonna be your E1B1B though. They have your E1B1B. They have your I's. They have U's. They got J's. They're all. That's when I say Germanic. The reason why it's called Germanic is because they're basically just a mixed company. That's pretty much
what I was about to say. It seems like a lot of the European nations are basically just mixed with each other.
Pretty much, and we also note that E lineage there, right? That's what makes it very interesting. That usually always that's their E1B1B there.
Yeah. And that could be associated with the Moors. That could be associated, because even during the time the Khazarians or the Ashkenazi converted, they was going at it with Moors or Arabs in that location. That was trying to get them convert to Islam.
In fact, that group, that certain group is actually going to be a group that was there for a long time. That E lineage, that E1B1B, was actually in ancient times up there. So they were mixing and mingling. It was mixing and mingling probably with the women, and that's how they started to become. Actually, a lot of them are actually look Caucasian, even though they're E1B1B. They look Caucasian, but they're E1B1B, and they almost look like they're European. Like that, you would some of them you look at, you wouldn't even know that they would be E1B1B, and they are actually E1B1B because that's what happened. A lot of the E1B, when they conquered, also throughout the Bronze Age and different ages, who they call the Arabians and whatnot, or the basically the the Arabics that was there in the land, especially in Damascus, in Damascus, is my saying it right? Damascus, in
Damascus. Yeah.
Damascus. There it is, Damascus, in right next to Syria. Those ones end up invading all the lands. They took the lands of the Hittites. They took their lands in Anatolia, which is Turkey. They came there and took their lands, and they were taken. In fact, a lot of the nations' names were changing to basically Arabic names because they were conquering a lot of the lands at that time. And that was basically something that was happening a little bit around the Bronze Age. Around that time, they came there and they were just going around taking areas and conquering and whatnot. And that was one of those things that is fairly interesting when you look at the full picture of it, that the E1B1B, it actually is not just from the Moors, because the Moors, we know they did come up here, but shockingly, they were already here. There was some that was already here. And that's why that mixture is like that, because they were mixing with these nations earlier in time, E1B1B. And that's why when you look at even in Italy and different places like that, because here's Italy, you can see E1B1B was here as well in this area a long time ago. Because look, it's not that far from Africa. You can easily go up. When you look at the map, it's not that hard for someone, if they had a boat and everything, to go up and shoot up, so they can easily move up there. That was one of those things that was definitely a choice. But that's why you can see evenly. That's what makes it very interesting, that evenly throughout the land, you see E1B1B in that red right there. You see E1B1B, and you also see almost all your Japhetic lines, which H, I, R, J, J1, J2, K, almost all your is a mixed company, pretty much. It's a mixed company. G's, almost all of them, pretty much. And there's more. This is just a small highlight, because you can't really see some of the smaller ones there, except a little bit right here. But there's more. There's more there. If you was to go more into detail, it's probably just like your larger ones on there. Most likely there's more, because I'm sure there's T's there as well and everything. Oh, there was one T in the yellow. So they got pretty much almost every Japhetic line in this area. So it's very interesting. And obviously, looking at the ancient genetics, you can also see who was there. Here is Italy is called Cardium. Who was there at that time in ancient times in Cardium? You have G2, E1B1B, I2A, J1, and T1A in ancient times. So it was mixed for a long time.
I don't want to cut you off, but this right here is also just showing why these Ashkenazis have E1B1B.
That's right.
That's because exactly these people were going up into these locations. They were, travelers, explorers, merchants. So they was definitely roaming through Europe.
So it's almost like, that's why sometimes you'll see them slip up and say that the E lineage is also European, especially E1B1B. They'll say E1B1B or E1B or E1B1 is European. Sometimes you'll see that said, but usually they'll keep it at Middle East at the farthest they'll usually go. But you'll sometimes see a rare slip up of saying European, stuff like that. I think I've seen that on P2. I think I've seen that on P2 where it said this was European and Middle Eastern, if I remember, on P2, on E1B1. That one actually says that it's Middle Eastern and European. And then they'll try to tell you that it probably came from Africa, different things like that, which we know it didn't. It came from the Middle East, as we can find the older ones, they word for word say. So I guess to make it more clear, Italy is, that's what I was saying. Italy, so-called Roman Empire wasn't even an empire. It's just a name that was given to an area that was actually a mingled group of people of confederacies going at it with each other for a long time, but settled in these areas that conquered Rome.
Con. So there you have it.
Amen, family. So it was good. I think it was good having this holy conversation. I definitely look forward to touching these things again. And if you look back and go back through these things, I guarantee you, this is one of the most, when Will brought this out, he said he's going to talk about this. This is one of the most solid pieces of information you can possibly have, because it's connecting the root all the way to the furthest, to where the genetics are found, to even modern genetics, where we look in Sao Tome and match that with who we found in that area, and we know that's a Middle Eastern lineage. So
like the brother said, man, we took it all the way back to the Middle East, to us African Americans today. A lot of people like to call us Africans, or y'all not Israelites, y'all Hamites, y'all this, y'all that. Yet our DNA is nowhere in ancient Africa, unless you count the Levant as Africa, right? Northeast Africa. But essentially, our DNA is not in ancient sub-Saharan Africa or West Africa.
Exactly. And in fact, the name Natufian comes from the Judean mountains that encompass Jerusalem. Because remember, that's how the Jews, the Hebrews, they used to bury themselves. They used to bury themselves in the rocks. But the Canaanites are known to do cremation. But the Israelites were known to bury themselves in rocks. And that's also important to know, because that Judean mountain, that Judean hill, the person that found the Natufian, very interesting when you start looking it up, that they was at the biblical locations, right? Hebron and stuff like that. Very interesting with those things. So, it gets really deep when you study these things. So it's good that we had talked about, because not a lot of people actually talk about the Natufian or the ancient genetics. So that was really good that we talked on that.
And with that, family, we say shalom. We say Todah for tuning in. You know what I'm saying? Continue to stay in the word, continue to stay in the truth, building your knowledge. And indeed, make sure you all follow the brother Lion Farm and his channel, because he does have many more videos going into depth in all these topics that we've reviewed today. So if you want to get more into the DNA, definitely follow the brother Lion Farm. And as well, like I said earlier, the link to these slides are in the chat, as well as in the bio. So with that, you want to say any final words, brother?
Nope, that's all I got. I appreciate the information, and shalom, family. Blessed be Israel, and blessed be those who accept the truth.
All right, family, shalom.